Definitely felt the rolling and the rumbling of the earthquake, and we're trying to get people on the phone, not making light of it. It's just like, it's just kind of, I'm thinking, was that an earthquake? And so then when you double check and then you start to get this information streaming in, yes, it was an earthquake, and it was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake. And you know, we felt it in the city, but they felt it all the way out on the island, and you know they felt it up in Westchester. So when we talk about damage, we always want to see if there's anything going on. We do have Dan Rice. Dan Rice is now. Dan Rice, are you flying or are you on the ground? What do you have? No, I'm not hearing Dan.
Is Dan on? He's supposed to be on.
I don't hear Dan.
Okay, he's not hearing Dan.
No,
we don't have Dan.
We're trying to get Dan. Well, if we're talking Dan Rice, we're talking chopper. So obviously we have the chopper up. We've not had any reports of any kind of significant damage. 4.8, I mean, you would consider that the typical earthquake around here is like a 1.8. So this is significant. I mean, this is, if 4.8 verifies, this is the first reports we have. That is a rather significant number. So we will want to see, first and foremost, anybody hurt. No reports of that, but then you go into any damage, so we don't have any reports of any damage yet. I mean, it's early. It's something like this. This might be something, you might find something a little bit later. Something knocked off. This definitely could have knocked off a couple of pictures. It was actually, you know, shaking and baking here in the studio, and we're up on the 3rd floor in a massive building. So you know, a smaller building is definitely going to feel it as well. You know, it's interesting. We take pictures. I don't see anything going on, which is good news. And you know, another thing we don't hear on the west side, we don't hear. I'm not hearing any kind of wild siren cacophony or anything like that either. I don't feel it's not like people were called in. Oh, and by the way, this is something you would not want to call. You would not want to call 911 for something like this. That's why we're here. We're here to tell you that, yes, you are not imagining things. It was an earthquake, but we don't want you to bother unless there is some kind of, if you have an emergency, obviously, feel free to use all the emergency personnel, but you wouldn't want to call just to report it, because it has been reported and it has been confirmed. So we are going to definitely deal with it. So Kevin, we're waiting to get some folks on the air. Hey, come on over here, Kevin. Come on over here. This is assistant news director. Come on in over here. So, did you feel it?
I did feel it.
What did it feel like?
We were in the building and it shook everything. No one knew what it was. I've never felt anything like that.
You've never been in an earthquake before?
Never been in an earthquake.
So I've been in multiple earthquakes. I immediately knew. I said, we're having an earthquake. Wow. And that's why I walked down in. We had one years ago here. So I remember, but I was in California. I worked in California. So, well, good. See, look at there.
Scary stuff.
I just put you on TV too, by the way. That's the way we roll here. So, and we're checking with some other folks too to see. So you are not imagining things. See, you're thinking, all these people that are texting me, no, you're not imagining things. It was an earthquake. And again, sometimes in the big quakes, you know, you think about Taiwan and you think about the deadly earthquake that just hit Taiwan, and you think about the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire around the Pacific is a very active area. We do not sit on an active area like that, so obviously we, you know, would never expect a 6 or a 7 like they just saw. Just imagine, and you know the Richter scale it's not a fixed scale, it's exponential. So every number that goes up, it's 10 times as bad. So we're tossing to Mary. We have Mary now. So a 4.8 is still bad. But consider that 7+ that they just had in Taiwan, it's not just 3, it's by multiples of 10. And when you talk about the reverberation of the earth, that was the landslides that called all the issues. So we did just get a statement from Governor Kathy Hochul, and this is it. I'm just reading it. I'm reading it with you, and I'm reading it to you. A 4.8 magnitude earthquake hit west of Manhattan and has been felt throughout New York. My team is assessing impacts and any damage that may have occurred, and we will update the public throughout the day. So you know what's interesting to me is that was a statement from the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. I would like to hear from the governor of New Jersey, because we are reporting that it was around Lebanon, New Jersey, which is well west of the city. So Kathy Hochul confirming a 4.8 magnitude earthquake did hit, and it was west of Manhattan, and it's been felt throughout New York. When she says New York, I know that she's talking about Rockland and Westchester, too. So my team is assessing the impacts and any damage that may have occurred, and we will update the public throughout the day. See how our minds work the same way? We all want to think, first off, we all want to worry about personal safety, but then damage gets to be a question. Because 4.8 is a serious number. When I walked into the newsroom and I was looking initially to try to find maybe a 1.8 or 2, and then they said 4.8, that is significant. So we are going to see, and I'm sure it was felt. Remember, here's another thing about earthquakes. Even though it's a line, it's on a fault like that, or it either goes like that or like that, but it reverberates in circles. And so that's why you feel it miles and miles and miles away. So I know if we felt it here in New York, I'm sure they felt it in Pennsylvania as well. And my neighbors who live out by me in West Essex were definitely feeling, and they felt it longer. Again, you had to be in the right place, and if you were stationary, all of a sudden you weren't stationary, and it was just that rumbling, just like that. So, in fact, if you have any other reports, reach out to us. I mean, we don't want to hear stories about damage, but it does speak to the power of these quakes that hit. If stuff has come off, in California, the earthquake preparedness is all about securing things to the wall. We don't have to be as stringent here, but some stuff, this kind of thing, something vulnerable may have fallen off a wall, and that was because of the earthquake. So again, it was a 4.8 earthquake centered around Lebanon, New Jersey. And then as we kind of dig into this thing, that becomes important, the depth and all of that. So we'll have more of that stats. Hey, I guess, you know what, who we're going to talk to now? I want to check in with my colleague and friend, Maurice Dubois. Did you feel it?
So let me just set the scene. I live in uptown Manhattan, right? About 5 miles north of the station. And I'm chit-chatting with my wife in the kitchen. We live in, one of these like brownstones. And all of a sudden, it felt like a train was rumbling right next door, and there is no train line next door, so that was interesting. And then just everything in the kitchen started shaking. The glasses, the plates, the whole thing was just rumbling. Your mind starts racing. Oh my gosh, heart starts beating. Is it guys with jackhammers? Is it a truck? Is it the washer dryer just finishing the spin cycle? And we looked at each other and just started running to the front door, up one flight, out to the front door, and then other neighbors were doing the same thing. So everybody was just catching their breath, reacting to what, certainly was an earthquake. We figured that out pretty quickly. And there's literally no damage to speak of in our neighborhood, in our house, or anything like that. But rattled nerves, damaged nerves. And, you and I, John, we've lived on the West Coast at different times in our lives. And I've felt earthquakes, but the ones I felt in the past were more like calm pulses going through the floor or the wall or the street, wherever I was. And they were of more magnitude than this, but this was scarier because it was more of a shaking sensation that was violent almost in a way for, fewer than 15 seconds, I would say.
Well, I hate to put you on the spot, but I want to ask you, because I got a call from somebody, they said it lasted about 15 seconds.
Yeah. So
you felt like it was 10 to 15 seconds of shaking.
I mean, I can't really put a clock on it, but it wasn't much longer than that. 15 sounds about right. That's a guess because you're trying to get your bearings and understand what the heck's going on. But it wasn't much more than that, and just it takes your breath away. But and think about it, John. We live in New York where everything has happened, right? So some of the worst things, some of the best things, but it's all happened, and this is enough to freak us out. Out west, this is kind of like, they shrug it off. For us, it's a big deal. And people are just, in a tizzy because this is supposed to happen here. And when it does, oh, my God.
I imagine your phone, like my phone, has been going crazy. And we understand why people are duly concerned by this. Plus, you've got the eclipse coming, so you've got people's minds are spinning. But you said, and I would just want to encapsulate this. You said no damage, nothing fell off the wall, nothing fell at the house.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. It was just a lot of rattling. We looked around and checked everything out, but it wasn't enough to really to do anything. So thank goodness for that. And then, like you said, we as news people, we're looking for damage, and we haven't seen any just yet, and thank goodness for that.
Yeah, and that is the good news. Well, Maurice, I certainly appreciate you calling in. I would imagine this will be on your show later today.
You think?
Yeah.
What do you think? This might be the lead story, John?
Yeah, I think so. Maurice, thanks for calling in. So I'm told now that we have Elijah Westbrook. Elijah Westbrook. Hey, look at this. Wow, we aren't messing around. So, Elijah, first off, where were you, and did you feel it?
I sure did, John. Good morning to you. Right now, we are live in New Brunswick, New Jersey. We were sent out here on an unrelated story, and as I walked inside one of the buildings and then got into my car, the car started shaking. It started swaying, and at first I thought it was just the wind was blowing because it did feel a little windy out here. When you get those normally strong gusts of wind, next thing I know, I see emails and text messages coming in from some startled folks saying, "Did you feel that? Did you feel that?" And someone who actually did feel that is Jill here. She's a student at Rutgers University. Jill, thank you so much for being live on the show right now to talk about this earthquake. It was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake. What did you experience moments ago?
So I was laying in my bed, and my whole apartment building just started shaking. And I freaked out. I was like, what's happening? I've never felt an earthquake before in my life, so it was very scary. My whole bed shook, everything shook.
Wow. And what were you thinking when that was going on? I mean, did you think earthquake at first?
No, I thought I was in a dream, honestly. I didn't think it was real.
Yeah, it's definitely quite startling. And like I said just moments ago, I was sitting inside the news truck, and the truck started swaying. I thought it was gusts of wind. Apparently, I guess and John, correct me if I'm wrong here, the proper terminology for the magnitude, I know it was a 4.8, and it was felt, I believe, in Lebanon, New Jersey. I guess that was the epicenter, essentially. Right. And again, correct me if I'm wrong on the terminology. Okay, so 4.8 Lebanon, New Jersey.
Now, the next thing we're going to worry about is how deep was it, and we talk about primary waves, secondary waves, but
right.
So Elijah, everybody's talking about it, right? Everywhere you go. I mean, people,
everyone is talking about it, including Jill, yeah. Yeah, it's very, startling. So what are your friends saying? What are other people saying about what they experienced?
My whole family group chat actually was blowing up my phone saying, what was that? Was that an earthquake? Then my friend from Delaware texted me and said that she felt it too. Everyone was feeling it.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, what was that?
Yeah, so it's not just here in New Jersey, of course, portions of New York State, New York City. We're also getting reports people in Pennsylvania and I believe Massachusetts possibly may have felt that. So we're looking at least the Northeast corridor, if you will, here. Jill, thank you so much. If we can just have you on standby in this area until we get back to you. But John and everyone else watching at home right now, certainly some startling moments out here in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Again, we were out here covering an unrelated story. I walked inside of a building, came back out, got in the car to write my script for a story airing at noon. Next thing I know, the car started shaking. I'm seeing some of the parked cars ahead of me swaying back and forth. I thought it was just gusts of wind passing through. So certainly some startling moments in this area and something that we normally don't experience, especially here on the East Coast. So I'm going to, of course, try to...
The car was actually shaking?
It was. I mean, nothing too aggressively, but enough to get your attention, if that makes sense. And then as I looked out the window, I saw a couple of cars that were parked on the same side of the street moving just a bit. So I knew something had to be going on. Next thing I know, I see text messages rolling in, emails, people asking, did you feel that? So very, very startling.
Well, Elijah, thank you. I'm going to be joined with Mary Kelvey here.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your hard work. And who's your photographer? Who are you working with out there?
I'm working with Eddie and Connie this morning.
Tell them thank you, because I know that was a quick hustle to get that live shot set up. So thank you. So we're back here now. We're in Studio 46. Magic. Did you feel it?
Yeah, I felt vibration.
So where were you? You in your office?
Was thinking, yeah, just in the hall, and I thought, I think we just had an earthquake.
Yeah.
Now, there are no major fault lines in New York like we see in California. However, we have had earthquakes before.
Here, yes.
Many of them you don't feel as much. In January, we had the 1.7 magnitude in Astoria, Roosevelt Island. But there, you know, there was even more significant reports. But I'm sure 911 was flooded with calls at 10:23 a.m. this morning when people were feeling those vibrations. I mean, we heard from Maurice that he was seeing, you know, even dishes shaking. But with a densely populated area like New York City, you're going to definitely have people calling in and saying, what is going on? We're not used to it here in New York. I know you've been through a number of earthquakes, right,
It's funny,
John?
talking to Maurice, you know, he worked in California, I worked in California. Yeah, I immediately knew it was an earthquake, which I knew was not unprecedented. It did seem like it lasted a long time, but it'll be interesting as we get more stories in, and we count on you for some of these stories.
Sure.
Some of the folks in, like, the 50th floor and the 60th floor, what they felt. Now, it was centered about 70 miles west of New York.
That's correct.
So that actually is going to help out a lot. Just got a call from someone in Chatham. It was like violent out in Chatham. I mean, violent might be a little hyperbolic, but I was talking to my friends in Cedar Grove, and they said everybody came out of their house. They were all commiserating. So we're here to tell you that you're not imagining. It was an earthquake, and that's what it was. And it was a pretty significant one at 4.8.
Yeah,
so you know who they tell me we have now, Mary?
Yeah, Lonnie Quinn is on the phone with us now. Lonnie, did you feel anything?
Mary, take a look at me, Mary. Mary, I am in my pajamas. I was sound asleep. It woke me up out of my bed here in Westport, Connecticut, and the thing that grabbed me about this, initially, I heard Elijah saying he thought wind. I thought wind, too. And then I thought maybe it was something mechanical, like at our home, like maybe like the boiler or something. So I get up, I run downstairs, and then I knew as I was running, I'm saying, this is an earthquake. I get downstairs, and I look outside, and we have some hanging planters. We don't have flowers in them yet, but a bunch of hanging planters. And they're all swinging like this. And I lived through the Northridge earthquake out in California. Now, I was not close to the epicenter at all. I was in Santa Monica out by the shore. And I remember the same thing. That's what I felt far, far away from Northridge. But in Santa Monica, I had a hanging pot rack. It, too, was swinging in the kitchen. I've been born and bred in Connecticut, and I have never felt anything like this. I've covered a bunch of little earthquakes in our area for work. The Ramapo fault line is probably the most sizable fault line that we have in this area. And even that, it's known for little, small earthquakes. This is sizable, okay? I mean, this is a sizable earthquake for this area.
Hey, Lonnie, I'm going to put you on the spot right now, and let's have some fun with math. As the crow flies, how far away are you from New York City?
As the crow flies, I am 45 miles from New York City.
So you're 45 miles away, and this thing was 70 miles away from New York City.
Also felt all the way to Philadelphia. So when you're talking about this is a large area, thousands upon thousands of people.
Now,
Guys,
no damage. There's no damage, right?
No, definitely no damage. What struck me was how long it lasted. Long enough for me to go through all these thought processes of, hey, it must be wind. Oh, no, maybe it's mechanical in the house. To get out of my bed, in my pajamas, run downstairs and see the plants swinging back and forth. I don't know, 25 seconds, maybe?
25 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I've heard
that's a lengthy amount of time.
Seconds.
Yeah, even shorter, I thought, maybe around here. So as you were saying, when you felt that significant earthquake out west, I mean, how does it compare from what you were experiencing this morning?
Okay. Once I saw those plants, all my hanging plants swinging back and forth, that's where it clicked in because, Mary, for me, I was far, far from the epicenter. Again, I'm in Santa Monica. The earthquake was in Northridge, south of Los Angeles. So, I mean, that's a long way. I'm north of L.A. and east of L.A. But it was the same sensation. The whole house is shaking. There's a sound to it, and the plants were my hanging plants were swinging. I don't know. It was a similar experience for me. I will tell you now that I've experienced 2 earthquakes in my life.
And then on Monday, total solar eclipse. We're going to freak everybody out here, Lonnie.
Yeah, okay. When this happens, the first thing I do, I sent our producer, Lane Stone, a text, right? And then as I'm on my text, it's lighting up. It's lighting up. I've got all of these eclipsed text lines right now. And I've been overwhelmed with eclipse questions and eclipse stuff. This was all earthquake. From people all over this area. Yep. I have one from, and I don't know if this person was in Long Island, but I know the person is a Long Island resident. I have an email from them saying, we just felt it.
Yeah, look at that.
And was Renat in Long Island or in Putnam Valley? I don't know.
Yeah, long stretch of area. So when we look at the last worst earthquake that we've had, we're talking about a 4.8 magnitude, but 5.9 back in 1944 would have been the worst that New York has experienced. And that was 80 years ago. So here we are and looking at this now, a 4.8, and still quite significant when we're comparing it to other ones that we've had in the past.
Without a doubt. I mean, like I said, we've had a lot of little ones. I've covered a bunch of 1.7s and things like that, and you're sort of searching. We're using our news outlet to find people who have a story, who felt something. People are flooding to me. I can only imagine what's happening right now at the TV station, but again, I was sound asleep. I work late nights, right? I was sound asleep. Woke me up. Oh, Rio, where's my dog? My dog was going nuts. And that's when, John, you bring up the eclipse. I'm like, all right, the gods are angry.
Yeah, no. Let's not connect those dots just yet.
So, Lonnie, what we're going to do now is we're going to head to New Jersey because we are hearing about reports there as well. And we're going from Connecticut. We've heard from Long Island now. Let's get to Natalie Dudrich, and she is in Hillsdale. And, Natalie, did you feel it?
Hey, Mary, we're actually in Hillside. We're at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey. We were in the middle of an interview about a packathon that's happening here, and then the camera started to shake. Al Lesner, who's behind the camera right now, was like, is that an earthquake happening? So I just want to bring you in because I was in the middle of an interview with Adam here. So, Adam, what were you thinking?
I had a spinal cord injury, so my legs always shake all the time. But when I looked around and saw other people kind of shaking a little bit, I said, what's going on? But I didn't feel it too much, but I just kind of assumed it was just me being me, shaking around.
And we've got, I don't know if you can see, but there's kind of a party at this packathon going on behind us. So we actually just thought that there was so much action and activity and boxes and food moving that's what we thought it was.
Yeah, and then I felt my phone buzzing when we were talking. I live in South Jersey, about an hour and a half away from here. And when I looked at my phone, my wife said, are you okay? I had no idea what was going on, but she felt it all the way down there in South Jersey.
Wow, so she felt it too, and so Wendy right next to you here was actually recording our interview on her phone. And then what did you say and feel?
Well, I was videoing Adam. I was like, okay, my phone shouldn't be shaking the ground. I've been here a lot, and we're moving a lot of food, but is that this much food that could move this place? But it was really crazy.
Right, we thought maybe there was a huge delivery truck coming by or something like that.
No idea. And then all of a sudden we realized, well, when I looked at Alan and I realized he's looking around, he's like, there was an earthquake. I was like, oh my God.
And then what about your phone? You've been getting a lot of text messages?
Like 50 text messages after we finished interviewing, and I realized, yes, everyone felt it everywhere.
And then meanwhile, Jay, and we've got a whole lineup of people here who experienced it, he was also standing by and saw the building, the pipes kind of shaking. Describe what you saw.
Yeah, the ground started shaking, but I was thinking the same thing. Is there a truck or is there something going on in the warehouse? And then you could see the pipes in the warehouse shaking and swaying back and forth. It was kind of unreal. And my wife had texted me, and she had said that our house was shaking for like 10 to 20 seconds. So while it was short for us, it was way longer for her and my kids.
Wow, yeah, and I guess I just was standing here just thinking this is the usual activity here because so much food is moving at the food bank. We also added Justin to our lineup of witnesses here of this earthquake. What about you? What did you see and feel?
I honestly thought it was just like a forklift that hit something because I was on the phone with my partner at work and he said all of a sudden the building started to shake. And I looked around, everyone was freaking out, so it's kind of crazy.
Well, it was certainly an experience that all of us felt over here, and that just describes the kind of action that's happening here at the food bank, that this is the kind of movement that we've been experiencing over here. So we were actually just saying they've got the 24-hour packathon shirts, and now they're going to have to update them to the We Survived the 2024 Earthquake Packathon t-shirts. We'll send it back to you from Hillside, New Jersey, Mary.
did anything, because I know at the food bank they stack everything so high. Did anything fall? Was there any damage or anything there?
That's actually a good question, John. John Elliott's just asking us if anything fell, but I don't think it was that big of a rumble here that we didn't experience any cans or food. And you can see, I don't know if Al can zoom in behind everybody here, but there is a lot of production. I mean, we have to plug this while we are out here because we are going to be live on this later, that we are asking for donations over here. So you can see they're all working hard back there. But you can also see, John, because it is active and it is a party, you can see why we would think that the ground was just moving because of all of the activity here at the food bank.
But as John was mentioning, I mean, impressive that nothing even came off the table, because if anything would have been damaged, it certainly would have been there. So that is really good to see. And thanks so much, Natalie, for keeping us updated and talking to all those folks. Glad everybody is okay and no damages. But again, we had this rare earthquake rattling New York City this morning. It happened around 10:23. The U.S. Geological Survey estimating the quake had a magnitude of 4.8, and the epicenter was about 20 miles north of North Plainfield. So we're continuing to follow all of that, and the Governor Hochul saying that she is assessing any damage reports that are coming in, but 911 being flooded with calls, of course, people feeling this. Right now, we are going to be joined by Dr. Gary Small. He is the head of psychiatry at Hackensack University Medical Center. We appreciate you, doctor, for talking with us.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
This is definitely a time that people are going to feel anxious, certainly. Now, you're originally from California, so you've experienced earthquakes before. Tell us, what do you think people need to know, even at this hour?
Well, let me say this. First of all, I didn't experience this earthquake just now because I was in the car. So everybody's experience will differ depending on where they're coming from, where they were, their past, their present. So someone with a pre-existing anxiety disorder, PTSD, an experience like this could be quite unsettling. I've been listening to the commentary right now, and I don't hear a lot of fear and anxiety. I hear energy and excitement, which I think is a sense of relief, because in the moment, when the earth starts shaking, there's a tremendous sense of insecurity. You've lost control, and you don't know what's going to happen next. And that's the other issue when there's a big earthquake. You have these aftershocks, and people are in a heightened state of anxiety, and they get quite rattled as a result. I can tell you that I was in California during the Northridge earthquake. You know, that was quite a bit bigger. It was 6.7, and that was terrifying. I mean, we were lucky that we had no real damage in the house, but most of the damage is when we opened up cabinets and things flew out. But I think it can be a very unsettling experience. So particularly people who are prone to being sensitive to stress and turmoil, this is a tough time for them.
And doctor, as we continue to talk to you, and we thank you so much for giving us that insight, we want to just tell you that the MTA is saying that there had been no impact on its service, but the teams are inspecting the train lines. We want to give you that update as well. But right now, the deputy mayor in New York City saying that they do not have any major impacts in the city from these tremors and this quake of 4.8. Let's get right now out to Steve Overmeyer. This is an important day at Yankee Stadium, John, right?
Oh my gosh, Steve, did you feel it? What's going on at the stadium?
And is excited for the adjustments he made in the offseason.
Yeah, out here at Yankee Stadium, this is supposed to be this is going to be the home opener, but it certainly kind of changed the tone a little bit for the home opener here for the Yankees. The quake was felt by some people here at Yankee Stadium, but not all. I was actually in the tunnel, and I didn't feel the earthquake at all, but when I stepped out here, a lot of the photographers said that their cameras were shaking for about 15 seconds, and they thought it was an earthquake. And talking to a couple of the Blue Jays players, they were in their clubhouse, and they said it felt like it was a train going overhead. They just assumed that it was just the subway because they weren't familiar with that feeling. But in talking with a couple of the Yankees, some of the Yankees players who were out on the field, maybe because they were running around fielding balls, didn't feel a thing, but other guys who were standing still said that they absolutely felt it, and it kind of concerned them a little bit. But there's no damage here at Yankee Stadium. All is well. Everything seems to be on pace for what is going to be the opening of Yankee Stadium for the season.
places at all time. But is there a big party going on in the parking lot right now? Aren't they opening it up right around now? I wonder if people out there felt it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't been outside since this has taken place, so I haven't had a chance to chat with anybody out there. We do have a couple of crews out there that could, but nonetheless, inside, it's kind of like this little mixed bag, I guess, of people who actually felt it and some who didn't. I think that some people might have just thought that it was part of the pregame ceremonies that they were getting ready for, you know? So you just never know what you might expect here at Yankee Stadium.
And Steve, we're hearing that the FDNY and NYPD both reporting that there were no immediate reports of damage, but of course both agencies are looking into any situations that may arise. Everyone recommended not to call 911 unless it is an absolute emergency. And Steve, you know, we're close to opening day at Yankee Stadium, and as you said, there's going to be a lot of talk about the rumbling and the shaking this morning, certainly.
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, the pomp and circumstance of the day is about to set the tone. The bunting is on the grandstands. We are getting ready for the opening of the season here in the Bronx. And I think Yankees fans have a ton to be excited about, especially after that 6-1 start on the road. And now they bring that home to the Bronx. I think there's just like a different feeling in this clubhouse right now with the Yankees. In years past, there's been this feeling of...
All right, if you're just following us, we are following breaking news. The United States Geological Survey says that the Northeast has been hit by a 4.8 magnitude earthquake.
Pretty big.
I mean, 4.8 is not nothing.
Yeah. So they report that the epicenter is White House Station in central New Jersey. Okay, we thought it was Lebanon. White House Station in central New Jersey. But the shaking could be felt in parts of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, my friends in Philly.
Yeah, people
we're asking about it, Connecticut as well.
Across the Northeast.
Yeah.
My sister in Rochester are saying that they felt it.
Wow.
If you just happen to look at, even in our internal email, producers and reporters at CBS News from across the Northeast are all weighing in and saying, you know, what they felt.
Strange. We felt it here.
We felt it here in the newsroom.
Yeah.
And our Chris Van Cleve, our transportation correspondent, is going to join us now on the telephone. He's in Maryland, where recovery and cleanup efforts are continuing after the bridge.
In Baltimore
after that bridge collapse in Baltimore. But Chris, let's talk about this earthquake. Give us an update what you're hearing from sources as it relates to transportation in the Northeast, specifically airports and railway.
Yeah, well, New Jersey Transit says they're subject system-wide up to about 20-minute delays in both directions as they're doing bridge inspections following the earthquake. Newark Airport, JFK Airport have ground stops in effect. I don't expect that to be a terribly long-lasting ground stop, but you know, the New York City airports are going to want to do some inspections. One, to make sure the buildings are structurally sound, and two, that there's no debris out on the tarmac or the runway. You know, we saw a couple of weeks ago what happened when a United Jet engine ingested bubble wrap. Remember, we had that fire coming out of the engine there that made headlines. So you can imagine if bubble wrap can do that, what a piece of concrete or pavement might do to a jet engine. So it's not uncommon after an earthquake for an airport to pause operations to make sure the runways and the taxiways are intact, to make sure the buildings are structurally sound before they resume operations out of an abundance of caution. You know, the good news here, you're talking about a 4.8 earthquake. That's certainly going to get people's attention, but tends to not be one that drives, you know, substantial damage. But, you know, that also can... you know, that also can depend a bit on where it was epicentered and whatnot. So right now you're going to see some travel disruptions getting in and out of New York, out of the airports. New Jersey Transit is doing bridge inspections. Those are the types of things that you would expect to happen after an earthquake like this, where they just want to make sure that things are structurally sound, that it's okay to continue operating safely.
Yeah, you know, it makes a lot of sense. Initially, when we felt it, you know, it just sort of felt like a train almost going past.
Yeah,
and I thought it was lower.
We first felt it rumbling, and we thought, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then we looked at each other.
It went on too long.
It went on too long, and then you started to look up at the lights, and they were kind of moving, and I realized we both did at the same moment, like, are we feeling an earthquake? And I was like, this is an earthquake, you know? Did you feel it in Baltimore, Chris?
there are reports of people feeling it. I'm sitting in a car right now, waiting for the president's arrival. So we're outside of the closed area. I didn't feel it in the car. I can look at the USGS shake map, and there are people in this area that reported feeling it. People as far south as Washington, D.C. reported feeling it. I was in Washington for the D.C. earthquake, which was, a similar strength. And, you certainly, if you're near the epicenter of this earthquake, you're going to feel it. You're going to hear it. It might sound like a truck backing up or the rumble of a train track. Northridge, when I was a kid, I remember that sounded like a freight train barreling at the house. So you're going to hear it in a lot of cases before you feel it. But there were some reports here in this area that did feel the shaking.
Yeah, one of our so it's interesting. Anne-Marie and I were in the Studio 57. We certainly felt it, but one of our crew members was on a break outside and came back and said, "What are you guys talking about?" He didn't feel it outdoors at all. So I think if you were working out, if you're in New York City and you happen to be working outside, or you happen to be walking outside, or maybe even in the subway, you might not have felt it because 4.8. In Jersey, it may not have actually registered the same here in New York City.
Well, I guess if I can jump in for a second, sorry to interrupt you here. We just heard from the FAA. The FAA says that this 4.8 magnitude earthquake in New Jersey may continue to impact some air traffic control facilities in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. Air traffic operations are resuming as quickly as possible. And, of course, we're tracking those delays. If you're in an air traffic control tower, the LaGuardia Tower is 233 feet tall. You're going to want to make sure that's structurally sound before you keep people in it. So that sort of assessment is happening at ATC facilities and at the airports. So for some period of time today, we're going to see some delays in and out of the Northeast out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah, so and what about the situation?
That should start to taper as the day goes on.
I wonder what the situation is in Philadelphia, too, because it just, what you're mentioning, Chris, are a lot of hubs. And so if we're talking about hubs being affected, there could be a ripple effect. So even if you're not in the Northeast and you're traveling today, you might, of course, Chris knows better than me, but you might just want to keep track of your flight.
Well, ironically, I am texting with a college friend of mine who happens to be a pilot who is flying into New York City as he's, flying in right now. And he's saying that he's hearing that there is some delay. Yeah. I think he's flying into LaGuardia, and I just texted him and I said, "What are you hearing?" So far, he's flying in from Florida. So I don't know, Chris, what happens when you're in the air and those delays start to accumulate. Do planes come in, or do they get, do they have to circle around? I mean, right now, he's thinking that it's okay, but who knows?
Yeah, so typically what you're going to do, the airport can get an operations vehicle out on the runway pretty quickly, and they'll assess the condition of the runway, and they may pause traffic for some period of time while there are people operating on the runway. And that's basically you're going to drive up and down the runway and make sure it's clear of debris. And then you would want to resume your arrivals. Planes have more fuel on board than they need to make the trip. So it is certainly possible that some flights will circle for a bit. They would call that, put them into like a delay pattern where they sort of circle the airport. We've all sort of been on one of those flights, I think, where you're doing loops around the airport for some period of time, usually due to weather. So you may see some of that. They'll look to get the planes that are in the air and arriving on the ground first. Looks like that JFK and Newark are primarily they'll look to hold departures before they leave the originating airport. So if you're flying from Fort Lauderdale in the next half hour, for example, you may end up seeing a delay just because they don't want to put the plane in the air until they know it can land. Mm-hmm. They'll get the planes that are in the air on the ground safely, typically. It doesn't sound like this is going to be something where they're going to be diverting a lot of airplanes and whatnot. And then they may hold flights at the gates in Newark and JFK just until they make sure that everything is safe to operate.
And just to let everyone know, the mayor of New York City, Mayor Adams, he's going to be holding a press briefing at noon. And just getting an update about the Holland Tunnel here in New York. Early inspection at the Holland Tunnel to New Jersey is clear. All lanes are open, which is good because there's a lot of train traffic that goes in and out there. So, yeah,
Yeah. And Chris, you may not have seen this because you're awaiting President Biden's arrival, but there was a very sort of cute and humorous tweet from the people who run the Empire State Building Twitter account. It said in all caps, "We are okay." All right, Chris, we're going to let you get back to the business at hand, which is, of course, awaiting President Biden's arrival, where he is there to assess the recovery and the damage control that is happening in terms of rebuilding that bridge, reopening the ports of Baltimore. So we'll let you get to that. Thank you very much for spending some time.
Hey, Vlad, real quick, It looks like the ground stop at JFK is being lifted, so you're looking at a ground stop still at Newark. So that's what I mean. These things will taper here as we go on, and so you may
my
see some
buddy
delays.
just
I don't think this would be a
texted
big
that
cancel maker.
he's in the air already, so everybody who's in the air is still, as of now, he says, still heading to LaGuardia, so we'll see what happens.
So hopefully it all works out. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you very much, my friend.
Sure thing.
All right, let's go to Errol Barnett, who is also joining us on the telephone. He's in Brooklyn. So, Errol, we were saying, as much as we love you, we thought, well, we can report what we felt the same way that Errol can report, because you're just in Brooklyn. Were you at home? Were you outdoors? Where were you when this happened?
Yeah, this is interesting, Vlad and Anne-Marie. This is the type of earthquake that has a lot of people saying the same kind of expression. What the heck was that? And so while, yes, I felt the earthquake while at home here in Brooklyn, my wife actually, I was in the home office. She was working from the living room, ran into me and said, "What the heck was that? Did you feel that?" And I've listened to both of you kind of describe it as, well, geez, at a 4.8 magnitude, which is this preliminary level the USGS now is saying was the strength, it almost feels like heavy traffic moving right next to you. And, you know, we're in a populated part of Brooklyn, so I dismissed it. But when she ran in, she said, I felt the room shake, the couch is moving all over the place, and for her, it was a lamp on the table. She said, and I could see the lamp moving back and forth. As I was running out to join you live, I'm at the Brooklyn Bridge at the moment. If you guys see the live shot, perhaps you'll be able to see where I am. But it is very much life as normal with tourists here. I was speaking with the concierge in my building, and she was kind of giddy and giggling and speaking about how she was questioning how long it would last. So it's the type of thing that I don't think frightened people, but it was strong enough to be felt throughout Brooklyn. You guys have mentioned our colleague saying they felt it as far as Pennsylvania. Some people in New Hampshire that felt this quake. So for many people here in Brooklyn, it just was a surprise. Everyone's asking, what the heck was that? And quakes do happen in this region of the country, just not very frequently. So I felt it. We all felt the world move for a moment, but, you know, tourists are still walking around Brooklyn Bridge Park, and life is certainly continuing as normal. But a bit of a blip. I know, what the heck was that?
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting, because what we're going to hear over the next, 12 to 24 hours is everybody talking about where they were and what they felt, right? But I suspect, and I was just texting with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law who live out in the Bay Area in California, and if you are in a part of the country where aftershocks or small earthquakes are commonplace, everybody, it's a normal thing. It's a normal part of life. In New York City, although it's not common, it's not unprecedented to have earthquakes. I mean, Chris Van Cleve mentioned the earthquake that some experienced a few years back in Washington, D.C. So I think why the New York media here, us at CBS News, we're talking about it, even though so far there's been no damage reported other than delays in transportation, everything seems to be okay. It's that we're not used to this. This is not common. So even for some of us who have experienced real earthquakes, even I, for the first 10 seconds, I was looking at you like, what is that? What is that? And then all of a sudden, when it kept going, I was like, my first thought was, it's some kind of a truck. My second thought was, there's some kind of nefarious act happening. I did think for a second, there's something going on that's not normal. And then within 10 or 12 seconds, I thought, this is an earthquake. And then I was like, my flight or fight kicked in, and I was like, am I gonna head out the door? Because I was saying to Anne-Marie, when I was in Haiti, in the day after the earthquake, the big earthquake in 2010, you felt aftershocks exactly like that. And you knew, because the buildings there are not sturdy, that you had to get out. And so every time that happened, and that would happen several times throughout the day and night, you'd race for the door and try to get outside. especially, you know, given the destruction that you saw in the actual earthquake.
Yeah.
So that was my first thing. I'm like, I'm getting out of here.
No, well, I can imagine if you have actually experienced an earthquake or experienced what you've experienced, this could be very unnerving.
Yeah.
For me, it was sort of a curiosity, but I can totally get why, you know, you would be out of the building and I would be still in here looking up at the ceiling, wondering why things are shaking. Yeah.
Right.
And if I could also mention, just consider is where my thought process goes to now, because this is the most densely populated part of the entire country. We have so many of the world's largest health systems here. If a hospital surgery room, and I'm sure hospitals are fortified against major quakes, but if you're in the middle of a very special sensitive surgery or a medical procedure and the room moves, strongly enough for a lamp to shake, and again, all of us saying our fight and flight jumps in. It was just a bit of a moment that I think we should wait to hear back from hospitals as well and health facilities, just to make sure. It may take time to realize what that jolt really did. Yeah. In the short term, it kind of unnerved all of us. Everyone seems fine, but this all just happened, in the past hour?
Yeah. So if you are tuning in and you didn't actually feel it yourself, there was an earthquake here in the Northeast. It was the epicenter was in central New Jersey, which means it was felt in New Jersey, in New York, in Connecticut, in Pennsylvania. It was 4.8 magnitude, which is not something to sneeze at here in the studio. It felt like a low sort of rumble, like a subway train passing by.
But I will say, Errol and Anne-Marie, I'm reading here some of these statements from political leaders across the tri-state area, and I'm reading this one from Governor Murphy, Governor Phil Murphy, where he says, our region just experienced an earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 4.7 with an epicenter. And at the end, he says, please do not call 911 unless you have an actual emergency. So here in New York, we have 311, right?
Yeah,
and
we
people
have 311
call
also,
in Philly.
Yeah.
So people call 311 like when they hear a cat who's outside their window. So I can only imagine
311 people want to quit.
Yeah,
right
exactly. 311 people, I feel for them because they're probably fielding a lot of calls. And some, look, if you're not watching the news or you're not watching CBS News Streaming on your apps or wherever you stream your news, you might be wondering what the heck is going on. Your first thought is, let me call 311. Yeah. But we should point out that so far, all the statements from Governor Hochul, Governor Shapiro, Governor Murphy, the New York City Mayor's Office, New Jersey Transit, is that while they're assessing, it does not appear that any significant damage has yet occurred, at least as far as the assessment, which is ongoing, is going on. So, folks, if you can, don't call 911, don't call 311, unless you really have an actual emergency, which is the message from our political leaders.
And just sort of remind people that if you are traveling today, though, your travel may be impacted if you're flying out. There had been some ground stoppages at some of the area airports. I think one has been lifted. I'm not sure about the status of the other one right now, but you may want to just check your emails or check your text messages for updates on your flights. And
so we're going to keep following this. I mean, I think, as I said, ultimately, until we start to hear. Until public officials like the governor, like the mayor, get in front of a camera.
Yeah, the mayor should be in front of a camera in about 30 minutes or so.
Okay, so we're expecting Mayor Adams, New York City Mayor Adams, to at least deliver some remarks on the assessment that is ongoing now due to this 4.8 magnitude earthquake that has hit the Northeast. That a lot of what we're going to be telling our viewers is what happened and getting a reaction from people who may have felt this earthquake.
I would love it, though, if we could find an expert on earthquakes to talk to, because I am really curious about why it is that some people felt it and some people didn't, who were, just feet from each other.
Right. And the other question, of course, is for many people who may not understand that while earthquakes in New York are rare, they are not unprecedented. Yeah. What it is about where we are, the actual geological circumstances of New York City, because the notion is always that New York City is on this like solid bedrock, right, that goes all the way down. Yeah. Unlike the West Coast, which is on a fault line.
Right.
And so somebody might be wondering, what are the geological circumstances that would lead us to feel an earthquake, given where we're situated?
Yeah, totally.
So, Errol, I don't know if you're still there. We're going to...
Yes, no, I can hear you both. And just, you know, as you guys are mentioning, this just happened.
Yeah.
So we're trying to share what we know in the immediate sense, but it'll be important to hear from the mayor here at noon Eastern. Life appears, I'm out on the streets of Brooklyn, lots of tourists still taking their pictures, cars and vehicles still moving, and I don't hear an overabundance of emergency sirens and signals, which would tell you, wow, you know, there's a lot of emergencies around. I don't hear that. So at least we're reporting and being transparent with viewers in real time that, yes, this happened. Things seem fine now. Let's wait and see what officials say and what hospitals report. I'm just looking at the USGS website. There's a 46% probability of a magnitude 3-point larger aftershock within a week of what we've just experienced. So those are from some of the experts, as you guys discussed the need for experts to chat about this. So, yeah, it's good for folks to be alert, to perhaps not do anything sensitive in the next few moments, and we'll share with you what we know in real time.
All right, Errol, that says something if you're not hearing sirens, because you're always hearing sirens in New York. 100%. It is the symphony of New York.
Gosh, you're right.
All right, Errol, thank you so much. We're going to take everybody back to CBS New York now for more coverage of this earthquake.
How much of the strain has been relieved by the operating fault. But as I said, this is a very small earthquake. So we may not see significant results on those satellite images. It's at 4.8 magnitude.
And Doctor, while we continue to talk to you, we just wanted to show some video that we just have into the newsroom while we're discussing all of this. This is from inside the United Nations. A Security Council meeting was underway when the earthquake hit, and there was some shaking that was happening. It was caught on video, and we're going to take a look at some of this as we continue to talk to you.
So here we are. We're inside the United Nations Security Council meeting, and we want to see the expressions on their face. Everybody says, what in the world's going on? I don't see a whole lot of shaking.
Just some vibrations there that we are taking a look at. I did see some movement, not extreme as we were looking at, but you see a little bit of that.
Compare that, though, to the video out of the Taiwan television station that was on when that 7.8 hit. That, I mean, look at the difference. Look at the magnitude of difference. But that is interesting. I wonder what they were thinking about when that hit.
Of course. I mean, that was the big question. And, Doctor, we were talking to our Dan Rice, who said he got out of his house because he was so concerned. I mean, is that what you would suggest people do?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last question. To go outside or inside the house?
If you're inside a house or a building and you feel shaking, I mean, what would you advise people to do?
The same thing that I was being trained since I was raised in Greece in a high tectonic active area is to stay calm, stay far away from windows because they break, far away from walls because they also break, and stay under a table close to one of the four legs of the table, not at the center of the table, always at the edges of the table and being under the shade of the table, so to be protected by any heavy object that may fall on you. We shouldn't run. We should wait. And depending on the situation, some people, they run. That is true. But most of the people, they get injured because you cannot run when the ground shakes.
That's right. That's right.
Doctor, this is such good information. We also have some video from Astoria, Queens. Someone captured the shaking inside their apartment, and we saw a bar cart, you know, really shaking as the tremors were being felt throughout the city. Of course, as we take a look at it here. You know, it's interesting because some people were saying it felt like a train was going by. When you were talking to Maurice Dubois, wasn't he saying he thought a train was going by, but he doesn't have a train line right next to his place? So there you go. I mean, I think that is a real good, I mean, that's it. Yeah. That's what we were feeling. You know, that shaking, that vibration. It didn't last long, but we all knew something wrong was going on, yes.
It is hard to capture video. I was in an earthquake in San Diego once, and I thought, well, the best place to show it, and it lasted a long time, went to the pool, and you could see there were waves in the pool. So it's interesting how it would manifest. That was pretty smart to just get a picture of that and to hear that. And that also kind of reinforces this 20-second duration.
Certainly. Let's give some transit updates now for you. Air trains at Newark and JFK, they are suspended until all of the inspections are completed. And the MTA is checking all bridges and tunnels for any damage. The NYPD chief of transit says there are currently no reports of any damage or service disruptions in the NYC transit system. They continue to, of course, survey all the lines and the stations. And, of course, we will keep you updated on any of the reports we're receiving from the MTA.
I mean, they do have to check all that stuff. But, I mean, they've got how many? I hope they're checking that's a big job to get all that stuff checked.
Well, here's what we know from NJ Transit. There are system-wide delays, and this is in all directions as the bridges are being inspected. Newark Light Rail Service and Riverline Light Rail Service both suspended system-wide due to track inspections. You know, we were talking to the doctor, and we were showing those pictures of just that one little crack in the wall. And so you can understand how they're going to have to take every precaution to make sure that all the lines are safe, that everything is secure. There it is. And we've heard a number of reports of people seeing this. And you think about what that's going to mean for all of these agencies to make sure they're not seeing anything that was due to this 4.8 magnitude earthquake. It was felt throughout the tri-state area, and it happened just about 10:20 this morning.
And that homeowner now has got to, that's got to be fixed. That's no small,
that's
fix.
for sure. You know what's going on is it's a big day at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. They were feeling it there too. And Steve Overmeyer, he is in Yankee Stadium as everybody, the players are out there getting ready. But boy, there was a lot of drama for all of us this morning, Steve.
Yeah, it was really more like a lot of confusion. It was like, did you feel that? No. There were people that were standing next to one another where one person actually felt the tremor, and then 5 feet away, the next person didn't feel the tremor. It was a little weird, but yes, now the stadium is starting to fill up with fans as they're getting ready for the 105 home opener here at Yankee Stadium. In talking with a couple of the Toronto Blue Jays, they said that they felt it in the clubhouse, but they thought that it was just a train going overhead. They had no idea. But then in talking with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., one of the players with the Blue Jays, said he was born in the Dominican and they had earthquakes there all the time, so it was not uncommon. He said he didn't feel hardly anything, but at the same time, you know, he likely wouldn't feel a 4.6. But still, he did recount one of his most harrowing accounts when he was in the Dominican, when he said that he's been on a 10th floor building when there was an earthquake that was so bad that it ruined the stairs, and they had to take a series of ladders to get out of the building. So he knows how dangerous an earthquake can be. That obviously was not the danger that we saw here at Yankee Stadium. In fact, in talking with one of the coaches and the players, it was a mixed bag as to who felt it or not. There are some people that said that they felt it inside. What's the general feeling when you hear that there was an earthquake?
I not feel nothing. Just my teammate told me. I was in the gym, do my prep, and I don't feel nothing.
Yeah. Some guy said that it felt like it was a train kind of going overhead. You know.
Maybe that's not a train. That's as strong as a train. You know, but thank God everybody's good right now, and that happened right now in the game situation.
Do you feel like is this an omen at all for the season to come?
Maybe.
What do you think it says? What's the message?
I don't know. But you know, it's something happen every year, and good thing is not nobody hurt.
Have you ever been in an earthquake?
Yeah, a lot in DR.
Yeah,
it's almost every month in DR.
Yeah, so
no, but it's normal for us.
What's the scariest experience you had with an earthquake? How does it
I had it one time when my dad played in 2011 with the Orioles. Yeah. I remember we got in the 10th floor. We had to take the ladders because we can't take the elevator. So
you had to take ladders?
Yeah.
Okay, that was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. talking about his experience that he's had in the past. But yes, some of the Yankees, on the Yankees side of things, it was a little bit of a mixed bag as to who actually felt it or not. Let's take a listen to what some of the Yankees had to say about it.
I felt something. I thought, right? And then, I'm glad to hear it because I know that I'm not going crazy now. But I felt something. I was standing at second base, just waiting for the guys to come out in the outfield, do some work. But I did feel something, so it's good to know.
Soto weren't taking BP under this.
No, they didn't come out. They didn't come out today. So, but I did feel something. Thanks for letting me know.
Some of the guys said it felt like it was a train going overhead.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it felt similar to that. I was looking around. I think Trevino made eye contact with me, and it was signaling that something was happening too. So I'm curious to go inside and find out a little bit more about it.
So on the field, it wasn't felt. Do you know if any of the guys in the clubhouse talked about it at all?
First time we heard about it. So I think nobody feel it inside of the field. I don't know. Okay. Nobody feel it.
Thanks. All right, so that's kind of the feeling out here. It's not dampen the spirits. It's not change the mood. The crowd seems to be ready and excited to go for this home opener here at Yankee Stadium, especially with this, as well as this team has been playing in the expectations they expect to see. But all is well here at Yankee Stadium, guys.
Governor Hochul making a statement at this time.
East Coast. We're taking this extremely seriously, and here's why. There is always the possibility of aftershocks.
Okay, all right. So we're trying to figure out what's going on because right now you've been watching WCBS coverage, which now we are taking you live to Governor Kathy Hochul of New York, who's speaking to reporters about that 4.8 magnitude earthquake that happened at about 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Let's listen.
Directed my emergency management team the second we received word of this to start doing damage assessments, any life in danger, and finding out whether there's any bridges or tunnels that are compromised. And so that was the first reaction you'll be hearing from the team that has been working on that. I also immediately spoke to Governor Phil Murphy to offer any assistance and to find out what is happening in his state, which again was the epicenter. Our teams have been in constant communication with the mayor of New York. We also spoke to the MTA to ensure the integrity, the structural integrity of the subway system, the Port Authority, and I want to announce that right now JFK and Newark airports are on full ground stops to assess any potential for after effects. And we've been in contact with the utility companies to make sure that the gas and electric services continue. I will report that Amtrak and MTA are on full schedule, no disruption there at this time. Been in communication with the White House. They reached out to us. The Deputy of Homeland Security Advisor, who's actually with President Biden right now surveying the damage in Baltimore, called us, and I believe they felt the effects even in Baltimore. So it's been a very unsettling day to say the least. But the White House offered any assistance. Senator Schumer reached out, offered any assistance. So right now, it's most important that we have our structural teams out there, our engineering teams, surveying our bridges, our roads, any area there could be a fault line that is not easily detectable to make sure that passengers on our rails as well as our commuters are safe. Assessing all state roads, Commissioner Dominguez is taking lead on that, making sure our state roads are safe. Major transmission lines and dams, because you don't always see the effects of a small crack that actually could develop into a real major problem. And we're also encouraging all the municipalities throughout the state of New York to assess for any structural integrity concerns. At this point, heading into an hour and a half after the effects, we've not identified any life-threatening situations, but we are certainly asking our local law enforcement and emergency services teams to be on guard for that as well. But again, we are going to be reviewing all potentially vulnerable infrastructure sites throughout the state of New York that is critically important in the aftermath of an event like this. Now, again, I have a few safety tips because New Yorkers are not accustomed to having earthquakes in our state, and everyone should continue to take this seriously. If there is an aftershock, people are encouraged to drop and to cover and to hold on. Drop to the floor, cover your neck, and hold on to something that is sturdy. Take caution near any damaged buildings. Again, we don't have reports of damaged buildings at this time. It is very early in the assessment process. But if there is an after effect, please stay away from buildings, that, especially our high rises. If you hear shifting or any noises, unusual noises, leave your home. Go outside. You are safer there than in a building that could be crumbling around you. Inspect your home for damage. Check walls, floors, doors, windows, staircases. And if you see any damage at all, you may need to relocate while the event is going on. Again, check your own gas lines and water lines to make sure that your family is safe. So stay connected and informed. I will say this, especially with all the national news about what happened in Taiwan with that deadly earthquake just this past week. I think there's a high level of anxiety around earthquakes. The magnitude, which Catherine Garcia and Commissioner Bray will explain, that was a 7.4 magnitude in Taiwan. Again, we are 4.8, and they'll explain the difference. But that's why we're going to continue to take this very seriously and make sure that we continue to update all New Yorkers. So Catherine Garcia, our head of state operations, you'll hear from first, and then Commissioner Jackie Bray, head of Homeland Security.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. I want to reiterate that we have no reports of damage at this time, and that immediately all of the infrastructure agencies activated their policies and procedures to deal with this, because while highly unusual in the state of New York, we do actually have fault lines. This was significantly bigger than ones that are typically felt in the state of New York or occur and actually are not felt. That is because earthquakes happen on a logarithmic scale, which means that a 3.0 is 10 times worse than a 2.0. So a 4.0 is 10 times easier than a 5.0. So every one of those makes a significant difference in what you will experience and what the damage could be. In addition, we are also tracking whether or not there's any increase in hospitalizations, as well as whether or not there's any increase in vehicle accidents that has not been reported at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Bray.
Not much to add about the governor and Director Garcia covered it. I would say we did see an overloading of cell circuits in the New York City area immediately after the event. We've been in touch with AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. Their networks are clear now and back up and working, and we have opened the state's Emergency Operations Center. We're at a level 3 to monitor impacts and reports that come in. We've seen one gas leak in Rockland County, but other than that, there don't seem yet to be major infrastructure impacts, but we are in touch with the counties. We'll stay in touch with the counties all day. Thank you.
Governor, has there been any contact with the Indian Point facility in Westchester and any concerns there?
That's part of our analysis of all critically important infrastructure. So yes, the communication has gone out, correct?
Yeah, we're in constant touch with both that facility and our other facilities. There's no damage reported at Indian Point. We wouldn't expect damage at this time, and we're in touch with Westchester, and we'll stay in touch with Westchester.
Governor, can you just say what you were doing at the time that it hit, and what you felt and what was going on?
No surprise to anybody here in the Capitol. I was meeting with my senior team, talking about their late night working on the budget, and we were talking about how we're going to move the budget forward today. So literally sat in the room next door. People felt different degrees of movement in the room, surprising, and all of a sudden everybody's cell phones start lighting up and describing what it was. So we were literally right here working on the budget and getting a budget done that includes a once-in-a-lifetime housing package may be the only excitement event we expected this week. So this was rather unanticipated. You cannot plan for this. There's no early warnings. There's no weather service that can tell you an earthquake is imminent, and that's why everybody was caught off guard. But fortunately, here in the state of New York, we are masters of disasters. We know how to handle this from unexpected snowstorm just a couple days ago. Everybody's anticipating massive crowds for another celestial event on Monday with the total eclipse pathway going through large parts of our state. So my point is we're always ready. We have planning in place for all of our teams activate instantaneously, and I feel very comfortable about that. But again, these are emerging situations. It could be over, but also there could be another effect, and we have to be prepared for that and warn New Yorkers to be particularly vigilant in the days following an original earthquake.
Governor, I assume your team has analyzed the aftershock forecast. What do they show? What should we anticipate?
Commissioner Bray, the former head of one of the heads of the National Weather Service. Is this something you can predict?
No, we don't
predict earthquakes.
We don't predict. The aftershocks aren't predictable, and so obviously we'll monitor USGS's information, but we're not looking at, these aren't forecastable events.
Governor, one more on the ground stop at JFK and the airports. Is there a timeline for how that gets?
We just spoke to them. Do they have a timeline? None of that? Okay, on the ground.
We don't have a timeline yet. What they're doing is really confirming that the air traffic control towers are safe to operate in. So as soon as we know, we'll make sure that that's public information.
Which airports were those again? I'm sorry.
JFK and Newark.
Not LaGuardia?
Not LaGuardia.
Why not LaGuardia?
Why not LaGuardia? Because they've redone their, they have a more recent, I'll let Catherine explain.
We're getting more information, but we suspect it is because they were renovated more recently and meet higher standards.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Any meeting with the legislative leaders today on the budget?
That'll certainly happen over the weekend.
Do you expect a deal this weekend?
All right, you were just listening to New York Governor Kathy Hochul there. If you are just joining us, we are continuing to follow breaking news. The United States Geological Survey says that the Northeast has been hit by a 4.8 magnitude earthquake. They report the epicenter is White House Station in central New Jersey, but shaking could be felt in parts of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. Dr. Judith Hubbard has spent 30 years studying earthquakes around the world, is currently a visiting scientist at Cornell University, and joins us now. Thanks so much, Judith, for being with us. First of all, as we sort of get our heads around what took place, for many of us here in the Northeast, it's the first time we've experienced something like this in this part of the world. Can you, first of all, talk about the rarity of a quake like this on the East Coast?
Sure. And so most of the time when we hear about earthquakes, we hear about them happening along plate boundaries, which in the United States includes California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. But here on the East Coast, people often don't realize that there are earthquakes here as well. Those earthquakes are usually quite a lot smaller and quite a lot more rare, and they don't happen on plate boundary faults. They typically happen on very old faults that are reactivating due to large-scale tectonic stresses. The earthquake that just hit New Jersey is one of the largest that's ever hit the New York City area.
So, Judith, I'm wondering, you said that large-scale tectonic stresses, to use your phrase, that is something that could potentially contribute to an earthquake. We don't know exactly, obviously, at this stage, what surrounded this event. But I wonder, what are those kinds of large-scale tectonic stresses? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most of the time we think about, one plate is moving past another plate, and that makes a lot of sense because you have to have fractures between the two plates. Here we are in the middle of a plate, but even when you're in the middle, when plates are moving past each other on the edges, that can cause stresses to transmit into the interiors of the plates. So the stresses don't just stay on the edges. The whole plate is getting squished and bumped and squeezed, and that can cause stresses on these old fractures that exist inside the plate. And actually, the location where the earthquake happened is on a fault that we know about. It's a really super old fault that probably formed about 200 million years ago when North America first split off of Africa. But it's still a fault. It's still a fracture in the earth. And so when you have these stresses being transmitted into the interior, they're often going to cause slip on places where the crust is weaker. So places where the crust is already broken in the past.
Given that it is a rarity for these kinds of events to occur, here I'm thinking particularly on the island of Manhattan, where you have many structures that are quite tall. One has to wonder about aging infrastructure, aging foundations, and whether or not the actual land itself upon which many of these skyscrapers sit is sturdy enough to withstand this kind of magnitude of an earthquake and to have those buildings be relatively undamaged. I don't know if that's a question you can answer, but I'm curious about the difference in maybe geologically the land that Manhattan is comprised of versus, say, out on the West Coast in California, where they are more experienced with these kinds of events.
It's a great question. There's a few different parts to that. First, we actually tend to get larger areas that experience shaking when earthquakes happen here on the East Coast. And that's because typically the rocks that we live on are older and colder and harder, and so they can transmit that seismic energy more efficiently from one place to another. That efficient transmission means more people might feel the earthquake, but it actually can reduce the intensity of shaking at a given location because when the shaking slows down, it causes extra strong shaking in one place. It amplifies the shaking, but if the shaking can be transmitted through the crust, then it doesn't amplify in the same way. But there are issues where when people live on what's called made land, places where people expanded like the city limits by putting soil into the ocean, those areas are especially vulnerable to earthquake shaking. So I don't know exactly in Manhattan how much of the land is sort of original hard rock and how much of it is places where people expanded the boundaries of the city into the ocean. Those areas can be more dangerous.
Interesting. And so as someone who has studied earthquakes, what are the questions that you have surrounding this specific event, given just how unusual it is for them to take place here?
So one of the first questions I asked myself when I heard about the earthquake, and I heard about the earthquake from my siblings who all live in the New Jersey, New York area, they said, Judith, what happened? Was that an earthquake? Is what is the history of earthquakes in this region? Earthquake histories don't tell us enough about faults to know how big the earthquakes can get, but they're a clue. And in the New Jersey, New York area, we have records of earthquakes that go back into the 1700s, maybe the 1600s. So there are some records of earthquakes of this magnitude, maybe a little larger. Like in 1884, there was an earthquake in the New York City area. And those tell us that earthquakes have in the past reached high magnitude 4, low magnitude 5, in some cases up to about magnitude 6. For instance, the Cape Ann earthquake offshore of Massachusetts. But there aren't very many of them. So this is really unusual.
Judith, I'm so sorry you dropped out for just a moment, but for our viewers that may just be joining us now, it is just before noon here on the East Coast, and we are continuing to follow breaking news here. Again, the United States Geological Survey says that the Northeast has been hit by a 4.8 magnitude earthquake, and we are fortunate to be joined by Judith Hubbard, who has spent 30 years combined studying earthquakes around the world, currently is a visiting scientist at Cornell University. And Judith, we are, as we are watching this shot of Manhattan here, we should let our viewers know we are also currently keeping an eye on a picture of where we expect New York City Mayor Eric Adams to speak at any moment. So when that happens, we'll, of course, bring that to you. But just a short time ago, Judith, we heard from Governor Kathy Hochul of New York State describing the initial assessments as they continue to try and survey whatever type of damage or injuries may have resulted because of this earthquake. And as of now, we have not received word of anything particularly extensive. But if you could give us a sense, Judith, of the context. When we talk about 4.8 magnitude, can you give us a sense of perspective? How large is that in comparison to other major quakes in recent history?
Sure. A magnitude 4.8 is not that large. It's large enough to cause moderate shaking near the epicenter, low levels of shaking further away. Some of the shaking reports for this earthquake come from 1,000 kilometers away. That's maybe 600 miles. So that's really far. But the shaking intensities were relatively low. In comparison, there was just an earthquake in Taiwan, a magnitude 7.4. A 7.4 releases about 8,000 times as much energy as a magnitude 4.8. So it's clearly a much larger event than the recent magnitude 4.8. One thing that people will probably need to watch for now is aftershocks of this earthquake. The magnitude of aftershocks depends on sort of the magnitude of the original earthquake, but the USGS does put out a forecast for aftershocks, and it's saying that most likely aftershocks will stay below magnitude 4, but there is a chance of aftershocks above magnitude 4 over the next year. an 8% chance of aftershocks above magnitude 5, which is actually bigger than the original event, and even a 1% chance of a magnitude 6 in the next year. So the earthquake causes a stress change in the crust, and that can cause other earthquakes to occur on nearby faults.
Really interesting to hear that, because we also heard Governor Hochul, in fact, warn folks that aftershocks were a possibility, and that if they were felt, that they should essentially brace themselves and protect themselves in the event that there were aftershocks. If you could, Judith, explain for viewers as well, what is happening during an aftershock? If one were to occur, people may wonder, is this the buildup? Is this something that signals potentially something more intense to come? Or what geologically speaking is an aftershock?
So we use different words. We use words like foreshock, main shock, aftershock. All of these shocks are just earthquakes. There is no physical difference between a main shock and an aftershock. It's just another earthquake. But we call them aftershocks because we know that after a large earthquake, or even a moderate earthquake, that it causes this change in the stresses on the faults. And so we typically see more earthquakes after the first one. Sometimes, in unusual cases, you'll have an earthquake that causes a stress change on another fault, and then that fault has a bigger earthquake. And then we rename the first earthquake a foreshock because it happened before the biggest earthquake. So there is a chance that this could be a foreshock, but nobody has been able to come up with a way to distinguish whether a small earthquake is a foreshock or not. So that's not something anybody can predict. We just know that there is an elevated risk of earthquakes now because the first earthquake happened. And so people should be alert to the possibility. They should learn what to do in an earthquake. They should look around their home and see, are there things that are earthquake hazards, things that could fall down? Are there hot water heaters, stable? All those things are basic good practices for being ready in case there is an earthquake.
Some very good advice. Dr. Judith Hubbard, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise with us. We really appreciate it, especially at this time. Thank you. Let's turn now to CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve, who has been following this for us as well. Chris, I know you are in Baltimore awaiting President Biden's arrival and visit there, but let's talk about what we know as you've been monitoring the airports and the other sort of infrastructure and transportation hubs in this area here in the tri-state area. What do we know about the airports at this moment?
Well, Newark Airport still has a ground stop for many flights in effect, and we know from United and Delta that they've had a handful of diversions. Delta had one flight divert that was heading to Newark. United tells us that they've had a few that diverted from Newark to other airports because of this ground stop. Now, some of that is simply because the airport needs some time to check the condition of the runways, the tarmac, and the buildings, that kind of thing, to make sure that things are structurally sound, but also that there's no debris anywhere that could get kicked up and ingested into a plane engine. That would be very bad. So we saw ground stops at both JFK and Newark, and some delays at LaGuardia because of this. Newark remains with a ground stop for many flights coming in. New Jersey Transit has said that they're expecting 20-minute or so delays both directions as they're doing bridge inspections following the earthquake. These are the kind of abundance of caution maneuvers you would expect because you want to make sure that the infrastructure is safe to go over after an earthquake, even if it was a relatively small one. The airlines look at what's going on right now is probably pretty manageable. Obviously, the longer that Newark stays in a ground stop, the more delays that will impact. But right now, this should be a relatively limited ground stop, we think, based on what we saw at JFK, provided there's no damage or anything, and so far there are no reports of that. United Airlines telling us they have no reports of any injuries to their employees or customers. Delta also telling us no reports of any injuries. One person at Delta told us that it felt like a large construction truck drove by. So this was something people felt, but as you just heard from the earthquake expert there, it would cause some movement, but not likely to cause catastrophic damage, certainly. So that's the good news there.
And Chris, you're well aware of the tunnels that lead into Manhattan here. I wonder if there's any word about some of the rail systems or the traffic tunnels. Have you had a chance to kind of monitor and get any kind of updates regarding the status of those?
The Holland Tunnel, we saw an update that everything was good in the Holland Tunnel. You'd expect the Lincoln Tunnel to be checked, and Amtrak will certainly run a test train through the tunnels under the Hudson for the trains as well. These are just sort of the standard thing you would do in a circumstance like this to make sure that that everything in abundance of caution type of thing. Typically, underground, as odd as it sounds, tends to fare better in an earthquake than above ground. So it seems likely that those tunnels will be okay. But what we've seen is that the relevant transit agency is doing the checks they need to do to make sure they can operate the system safely.
All right.
So you may see some delays throughout the day here, Elaine, I think is the bottom line. But it doesn't sound like this is going to be something that snowballs into a substantial airline cancellation or a commute nightmare for folks getting home any more so than you would normally see on a Friday in the tri-state.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Chris Van Cleve. We appreciate it. Let's turn to CBS News White House reporter Bo Erickson, also following the story for us. He is in Baltimore covering the president's trip there. So, Bo, what do we know about President Biden's briefing on this? Has he been briefed? How's the White House responding?
Yeah, so we just found out a few minutes ago that the president was briefed on this earthquake in the New England area. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said the president was briefed by his team and they will be in touch with local officials if they need any assistance from the federal level. The president is still scheduled to come to Baltimore today to view the bridge wreckage behind me and meet with family members today at this event.
And Bo, I'm just curious if you, at your position there, if you felt anything there in Maryland, as this, was certainly something that many of us here at the CBS Broadcast Center and throughout the tri-state area here, frankly, we're talking about. Was there anything perceptible there from your vantage point?
Not that I can tell. We did not feel it down here in Maryland. It's about a 2-hour drive south of that New Jersey epicenter area. But we didn't feel anything here, so the president's trip to the area is still on schedule.
All right. Bo Erickson, Bo, we appreciate the update. Thank you, Bo. Let's bring in Robert Weiss now for some analysis. He's a professor of natural hazards in Virginia Tech's Department of Geosciences. Thanks very much for being with us. What are the kind of immediate questions, Professor, that spring to mind, given the rarity of an occurrence like this here in the Northeast?
Yeah, so the last big earthquake that occurred, a 5.0, occurred 1884. And it is always interesting to me how these earthquakes are very rare and very small, and then occur in an area that has been, or is geologically very, very old. We're talking rocks and formations that were formed many
I'm so sorry, Professor. We're going to have to interrupt because New York City Mayor Eric Adams is coming to the podium very shortly, we are told. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Experienced a 4.8 magnitude earthquake. While we are still assessing the impact of this incident, we currently do not have reports of major impacts at this time. Our teams moved quickly to coordinate across city and state agencies and make sure that New Yorkers were safe. We've brought together key leaders to provide people with more information about the earthquake and ongoing efforts. So we're joined today by Mayor Eric Adams, Chief Advisor to the Mayor Ingrid Lewis-Martin, Chief of Staff Camille Joseph Varlick, Emergency Management Commissioner Zach Iskel, Police Department Commissioner Edward Caban, and senior members of the NYPD leadership, FDNY Commissioner Laura Kavanaugh, Public Schools Chancellor David Banks, Department of Buildings Commissioner Jimmy Otto, Department of Sanitation Commissioner Jessica Tisch, Department of Transportation Commissioner Yadanis Rodriguez, Department of Environmental Protection Commissioner Ray Agarwal, Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs Commissioner Manny Castro, Housing Preservation and Development Commissioner Adolfo Carrion, Mayor's Office of Community Affairs Commissioner Fred Kreisman, New York City Health and Hospital Senior Vice President and Chief Quality Officer Dr. Eric Way, NYCHA Executive VP of Operations Support Services Keith Grossman, MTA CEO Jano Lieber, Con Ed President Matt Ketschke. So first I'd like to introduce Mayor Adams.
Thanks so much, Dean Levy, and I'm sure there are many questions
that need to be answered. All of us felt in some way or another the earthquake that hit our city around 10:23 a.m. We felt the impact of this 4.7 magnitude earthquake. The epicenter was in Lebanon, New Jersey, about 50 miles from New York City. And as you know, this is a developing situation where you're always concerned about aftershocks after an earthquake. But New Yorkers should go about their normal day. First responders are working to make sure the city's safe. And one thing we do so well in our city is bring together all of the agencies that are involved and our partners in other entities. Everything from the MTA to the Department of Buildings, the parents who are concerned about their school children. Chancellor Banks would be here to report on that, but we say over and over again, the safest place for our students, we believe, will continue to be in school. At this point, we do not have any reports of major impacts to our infrastructure or injuries. But of course, we're still assessing the situation and we'll continue to update the public. We're in touch with the White House, the governor's office, and local elected officials. And I encourage New Yorkers to check on their loved ones to make sure that they are fine, not only from the infrastructure damage, but this could be a traumatic moment for individuals going through an earthquake. And if you feel an aftershock, drop to the floor, cover your head and neck, and take cover under a solid piece of furniture next to an interior wall or in a doorway. And so I want to thank the emergency staff and first responders for their work to keep New Yorkers safe. Earthquakes don't happen every day in New York. So this can be extremely traumatic. The number of texts, calls, and inquiries that people sent out to not only our administration, but to family members checking on them. We know how this can impact you. But we're ready for the unexpected. This is New York City, and we respond accordingly. We will continue to update New Yorkers as we get more information. And I would now turn it over to Commissioner Isco.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to my colleagues for their quick and speedy response to this. I'm pleased to report that there are currently no major impacts or safety events related to this earthquake. We're asking all New Yorkers to call 311 to report damage or any issues that you're having. Also, if you have any need for disaster assistance due to damage or anything like that, please call 311. That is the best place to refer those needs. If you have a life safety issue, please use and call 911 immediately, but preserve 911 for those life safety events. The team acted immediately. We convened our emergency response teams and issued guidance to the public. The likelihood of aftershocks remain low, but we do remain vigilant, and we ask all New Yorkers to remain vigilant as well. We activated our protocols for this earthquake. We immediately started coordinating with all city, state, federal, and our utility partners. Public notifications were sent out both by Notify NYC and our wireless emergency alert system. You can hear some of the phone buzzings and delays from that have been issued. As soon as it happened, we convened here at New York City Emergency Management in order to be able to send out guidance. We activated, as soon as we convened here at NYSEM to send out our guidance for what happens during an earthquake, including on the possibility of aftershocks. We contacted our City Hall and agency commissioners, as well as all of our partners at the federal and state level. That also includes all of our utility partners, our transportation partners at the MTA, Port Authority, and the airports. While there is a low likelihood that there will be aftershocks, we always want to be on the safe side. So if you are outside during an aftershock, please move to an open area away from buildings, trees, and power lines. If you are driving, pull over to a safe location. We're asking people to check in on their relatives, on their loved ones, neighbors, especially the children and their other individuals. I think that this is also an incredible time just to remind us all to make sure that we're prepared. So if you are a New Yorker, if you're visiting New York, we encourage you to sign up for Notify NYC. This is available in 14 languages, including American Sign Language, over 1 million subscribers. You can sign up by calling 311. You can call up by downloading the app or by going to nyc.gov/notify. We also encourage people to make sure that they have an emergency kit and to make sure that they know the guidance for earthquakes, which, as the mayor said, to drop, cover, and to get under furniture, sturdy furniture, or in a doorway to make sure that you are safe. Please also make sure that you're checking your utilities, that you know how to turn them on and off, especially if you are a property owner. With that said, who am I turning it over to?
Chancellor Banks.
Chancellor Banks. I'll turn it over to Chancellor Banks for an update on the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. So the earthquake was felt across the entire city and across many of our schools across all 5 boroughs. In fact, I was at LaGuardia High School at an event this morning when the earthquake hit. I did not personally feel it, but many people in the room felt it. So first and foremost, what's most important to understand is we want to emphasize that we've received no reports of any injury to staff or students. And that's the most important thing, and safety is our top priority in ensuring that everyone is safe in our schools. Immediately following the earthquake, our teams, both within New York City Public Schools and across the city, immediately jumped into action. We've been in close and constant communication with City Hall, the Office of Emergency Management, School Construction Authority, and other agencies as well. So at this moment, there is no indication that any of our buildings were compromised. And our facility staff at the School Construction Authority are quickly and thoroughly inspecting buildings to ensure safety. And out of an abundance of caution, we've assembled all of our building response teams as well. So we've instructed all of our school principals to continue operations and dismissal as normal. We ask the school staff and families to remain calm and to model that for all of our students, all of our children. Parents do not need to pick up their child early as a result of today's earthquake. Additionally, all after-school programs will continue as planned. If conditions change, our schools will communicate directly with families. We also will post updates on our social media pages, which can be found at NYC Schools. I want to thank all of our school staff and our facility staff for keeping our students safe during times like these. Their professionalism in the face of an emergency is a role model for all of our students. Again, the top lines, all of our students across the school system are safe. All of our staff are safe. We have no reports of any structural damage to any of our school facilities, while many schools in fact felt some tremors from the earthquake. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chancellor. Next, we'll hear from Buildings Commissioner Jimmy Otto.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Let me say right at the outset that we at the Department of Buildings have not seen an influx of calls regarding building damage, but we want all New Yorkers to know that our team is ready. We are putting on additional construction and engineering professionals from this point on over the weekend. So if reports do come in, we will be ready to respond. Our construction enforcement unit is out doing inspections similar to what we do prior to big storms. There are 1.1 million buildings in the city, which means we need cooperation from construction professionals. We've messaged that to them, but let me take this opportunity again to remind all of our construction professionals, you need to go out and check on your buildings, even if those sites are closed, and determine that the sites are secure. And if you see any conditions that are troublesome, please reach out to the department. This is a time for that tried and true saying, if you see something, say something. So to New Yorkers, we at the Department of Buildings are concerned about some of the downstream possibilities, cracks that you might see that may materialize and manifest in a week or a month, or scaffolding, retaining walls. If you see something that is problematic, please call 311. This weekend, we will have an increase in our emergency response team. We've mobilized our borough operations and our special ops folks so that if our sister agency, the fire department, or any of our partners in government or the public report an increase in locations, we are at the ready to respond.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next, we'll hear from Con Ed President Matt Ketschke.
So thank you. So for our energy delivery system, energy infrastructure, there were no impacts from this event. We continue to monitor them. Our critical energy infrastructure is continuously monitored. During the course of the event, we saw no change in status for our energy infrastructure. We do have a series of protocols for after another quake event. We have initiated those. Those involve inspecting our critical facilities and working through all our facilities for inspection. Those inspections are ongoing. We haven't identified any issues. In the case of an earthquake, one of the things that from the energy side we would be concerned about is the potential for gas leaks. So I encourage, if you smell gas, either call 911 or 1-800-75-CON-ED and report the gas leak. Do not assume that somebody else has reported. So if you smell gas, call us or call 911 immediately. Otherwise, we'll continue our inspections and all looks good.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Next, we'll hear from MTA CEO Janno Lieber.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Adams and Commissioner Iscol. I want to reassure New Yorkers that the service on the transit system, all aspects of the transit system, maintained continuously, operating safely throughout the incident, and has continued right to now. I've been in touch with the president of all the MTA agencies, starting with Bridges and Tunnels. Kathy Sheridan, the president of MTA Bridges and Tunnels, is here, but also New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. Initial inspections of all the facilities have been completed, and there are initial further inspections ongoing, emphasizing that the 7 bridges operated by MTA have been inspected, and I want to emphasize those were designed to withstand much stronger seismic impacts than we experienced today. Our frontline staff across the system have been instructed to report any abnormalities. There have been none so far flagged. And of course, we're going to continue to monitor the situation very, very closely. We have an open communications bridge with all of our MTA agencies to report, as I said, any abnormality that they encounter. So far, the input on that has been 0. We're going to let riders know if there are any impacts to service, but there are none. Just as the Chancellor said, the school system is operating fully, so is the MTA transit system without disruptions caused by the earthquake. I want to thank Mayor Adams, your entire team, and also Governor Hochul, with whom I've been in touch, for their leadership throughout this challenging moment for the city and the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, we'll hear from Manny Castro from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs for a few words in Spanish.
Muy buenas tardes, soy Manuel Castro, el comisionado de Asuntos de los Inmigrantes de la Ciudad de Nueva York. Hoy estamos con el alcalde Eric Adams, los comisionados de varios departamentos de gobierno de la Ciudad de Nueva York, para asegurar a los neoyorquinos que no estamos viendo ningún problema en nuestros servicios, ya sea de puentes, de escuelas y otros servicios críticos dentro de la Ciudad de Nueva York.
All right, we have been listening to a news conference there. We heard a moment ago from New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who essentially said that there were no reports of major impacts to infrastructure or injuries. We then heard from a number of other officials, including the school's chancellor, essentially saying the same thing. This was an event that was certainly felt across New York City, but there have been no reports of injury, the chancellor said, to injury to staff or to students. Let's go ahead and turn now to our Errol Barnett in Brooklyn, New York. Errol, I was listening earlier to your own account of what it was like for you when you felt this. What else do we know about this earthquake so far?
Well, Elaine, I think it's interesting now that we've heard from the governor and the mayor that the immediate headline is there doesn't appear to be any major damage or major issues as it relates to transportation, schools, or people's safety. But this did just happen a few hours ago. And for me personally, here in Brooklyn, my wife and I both felt this quake. And at a 4.8 magnitude, for me, I interpreted it as a large semi-truck maybe driving by our building. But for her, and I was moving around our place in our home office, she was in the living room seated in one position and was quite shocked and came to me and said, "What was that? That wasn't typical." She saw a lamp moving back and forth, which was her key, that this was unusual. Our cameraman mentioned to me that he felt it in his home, steps outside, and each of the neighbors are looking at each other saying, "Did you feel that? Did you feel that?" And everyone kind of felt this thing. So, when you consider that this is the most densely populated part of the entire United States, with some, 20 million people in this New York City metro area, the epicenter is in northern New Jersey, a heck of a lot of people, Elaine, felt this quake and felt this movement. And I also just shared that, when it comes to emergency vehicles and emergency crews and police sirens that you might hear in New York anyway, there doesn't appear to be that taking place. I'm at Brooklyn Bridge Park. This is a tourist attraction, of course, because of these views, and I see dozens of tourists going about their day taking pictures. But for those of us who felt it was jarring. We want to make sure that the hospital systems don't report any adverse issues as it relates to people being treated and going through special surgery. And you also want to spare a thought for neurodivergent people who might experience this thing, as some of us might giggle and say that was strange. It may have really unnerved and bothered others as well. But the immediate kind of headline is that things appear to be operating as normal, but a heck of a lot of people felt the earth move for a number of seconds this morning.
No, it's a really good point that you raise, Errol, that just the psychological impact, while there may not have been any sort of physical damage, or at least not yet any kind of reports of infrastructure damage or injuries, that for some people, this is certainly something that can evoke a lot of fear. And we heard the local officials a moment ago talk about that. We want to mention we're sort of monitoring that news conference. And when Mayor Adams begins to take some questions, we might jump right back to that. But one of the things, Errol, that we heard from local officials earlier is that there could be the potential for aftershocks. And they were instructing people, if that happens, folks should drop to the floor, cover their heads and their necks, take cover under a solid piece of furniture near a sturdy wall or doorway. I'm wondering, Errol, just in the neighborhood, in the surrounding area where you are right now, have you had a chance to talk to others yet? I know you've literally been on the phone, on the air with the stream since this started. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to talk to folks beyond just the crew and the folks in your immediate vicinity, though. What are people saying, if anything, about sort of how they're processing what just took place?
Well, Elaine, I can share with you our cameraman's wife was in a building in Staten Island that was evacuated when this quake happened. So, it may be the case that a lot of places did move quickly to get out of buildings. And I think we heard an expert share the probability of aftershocks. I was looking at the USGS website, and it mentioned under the information for this quake. And also keep in mind, magnitudes can change from the preliminary report to what they then go back and fact check. But it shares the fact that there's somewhere between a 40% chance that in the next week, this region will experience a magnitude 3 or larger. Again, not a severe quake, but movement that people will notice. And a woman I was speaking with as I was rushing out of our building, the concierge, shared with me that, she saw pictures on the wall shake and she was wondering how long it would last. So this wasn't a brief quake. It lasted for a number of seconds, and even in the past few hours, I'm not sure if this is true of your phones, perhaps you're seeing this as well, but my phone continues to receive an alert, an emergency alert warning of aftershocks to come. And so we heard from the mayor, we heard from the governor. There's certainly an emergency posture and response that we've seen now for a few moments. But in the short sense, it does appear that things appear to be operating as normal. And we also saw at both Newark and LaGuardia, there were brief ground stoppages for aircraft. That may create a bit of a travel hiccup for anyone coming into or through New York City in the next few hours. Again, the most densely populated part of the United States experienced the ground move for a number of seconds this morning, and will continue to kind of measure the impact that may have in many areas.
All right, our Errol Barnett reporting for us from Brooklyn. Errol, thank you so much. Let's turn back to Dr. Robert Weiss for some analysis. You recall I had to cut you off, Professor, earlier. Apologies for that. But he is a professor of natural hazards in Virginia Tech's Department of Geosciences. And Professor, I wonder if you could just go back to the notion of how often an event of this magnitude happens in this particular part of the country. How rare is this?
Extremely rare. It would take several decades between events, main events, to take place of that magnitude. There always is a chance of smaller earthquake to take place, and those earthquakes most likely are not going to be felt. The shaking of this earthquake is interesting because it is felt in a larger area, up to the Baltimore and even DC area. People felt it, as it appears. But again, the design criteria for building and bridges and tunnels and infrastructure in general are in a way that it should easily withstand the accelerations of the ground, the shaking of the ground that are generated by those earthquakes. Shouldn't be a big problem. And as you can see, the operations in New York City seem to be back to normal.
That was going to be my question, Professor. When it comes to not just the buildings, but just the infrastructure of New York City itself. I'm thinking about, for instance, the subway system. We heard from the city officials a moment ago, essentially saying that their operations have continued uninterrupted, even as people start to kind of process what has taken place, but that their operations continue because of the fact that, as you say, these tunnels, these systems have been designed to withstand seismic events of greater magnitude than this. But it does occur to me that these are aging tunnels, they're aging systems. Can you talk a bit about the effect of something like this, the wear and tear simply on a system, even though these may have been over-designed in a sense to withstand these kinds of magnitude events, that it does actually have an impact, does it not, over time?
Yeah, so planners are different than like the average person on the street. We don't usually anticipate to encounter an earthquake, right? That's not on our mind, but planners do. They are working with engineers to design those buildings in the context of where they are in terms of natural hazards that could hit the infrastructure. In this context of continuous maintenance, the American Association or Society for Civil Engineers, ASCE, they give scorecards for these kind of aging infrastructure. And I can tell you across the United States, the score that ASCE gives for general infrastructure maintenance is not a very high one. But events like today remind us that we do need to pay attention to those deferred maintenance costs and actually make sure that our infrastructure functions as designed. And an older bridge may not withstand an earthquake that is a little bit larger than what we observe today. But in general, I would say infrastructure is in good shape. But we do need to pay attention because of every incident like today results in a decrease of functionality of the infrastructure, or could result in a decrease of functionality. Small cracks and so forth can really be something detrimental to infrastructure as they develop over time.
Right. Could you talk about that a bit more, Professor? I'm thinking in particular of areas that may be not part of the initial sort of bedrock foundation here in the tri-state area. If there may be some coastal areas, for instance, that have been filled in order to allow for development there, how vulnerable would those kinds of areas be?
So it's actually kind of interesting to look at areas that are filled in with soils and are not part of the bedrock. It's actually likely that those areas did not feel at all the impact of the earthquake, especially in greater distances from the epicenter, because of the way seismic waves travel through the ground. If it is a very solid rock, like what we call crystalline rock, that is solid and was generated as part of perhaps a magma chamber of a volcano many million years ago, seismic waves travel really efficiently through that area and then cause significant shaking. But in sedimentary rocks, that's not the case. So what we call dissipation of energy is much larger, and therefore the effect is much lower. So I would speculate that in coastal areas where fillings took place, while there may have been shaking, it was much less felt than in other areas that are based on a solid like ground of crystalline rock.
All right. Well, Professor Robert Weiss, Professor, we thank you very much for taking the time to help us understand this geological event. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
We want to take you now to CBS News New York, which has been in continuing coverage of this earthquake. Let's go ahead and join them in progress.
A little bit different, When you're closer to it, no question about it, John. And we also have video from Lebanon, New Jersey, and you can see a camera outside a home. And yeah, you see that shaking pretty rapidly. And, you know, if you time it out, some people were saying 15 seconds, but some of these are a little bit quicker than that. But this was pretty close to the epicenter of the quake. We did hear from Dan Rice, and he was saying that he really felt a significant shake. He's close to the epicenter too.
Seconds.
Exactly. Some of these are a little bit shorter than that, 15 to 20 seconds. Some people reporting up to 30 seconds. So it really depended on where you lived. But in Manhattan, there was a bit of shaking, a little bit of vibration. People wondering, was that a train coming by? What's going on? So, boy, what a morning, right, John?
Well, I will say this, and I have a little update for you, and you're not going to like hearing this. The USGS traditionally will not do an aftershock forecast if it's less than magnitude 5.
Yeah.
What's our magnitude, Mary?
We're at 4.8.
So when everybody talks about 5 is kind of a cutoff. It's a very important number. So we may not get an aftershock forecast. One of the other professors we talked to said it's usually a 24-hour window, but a big quake, it can be days and days and days. So we probably will not get a forecast for aftershocks from the USGS, but it's a possibility. Traditionally, they are much smaller, and with this kind of quake, we may not get any.
But Governor Kathy Hochul, so concerned that she was giving out safety tips during her press conference just a little while ago, and very clear. She said there are several steps you should take. One of them is drop cover and hold on. I mean, this is really concerning in regard to if there is an aftershock. Also, you know, take caution and near any damaged buildings if anything like that were to happen. And also, you know, if you hear any shuffling, her advice was to leave the house. That's what emergency experts say. Also, inspect your home for any possible damage. Of course, the gas lines that you were talking about earlier. And you have to really be careful when it comes to gas lines, certainly, water lines as well. Now, we did have a report of a gas leak in Rockland County, not a major one, but something certainly that's going to have to be assessed and taken care of. That's correct.
It's a long way away.
Yeah, so that fault line that we've been talking about, the Ramapo fault line, possibly being at fault for this. So, of course, the USGS will be really, really looking at this precisely to determine how far it was, how deep it was, and much more.
Biggest one in over 100 years.
It's really quite incredible to think that we're experiencing this all together, millions of us. And, you know, we have such a big event coming up on Monday, so much is happening with the Earth for us right now. But, of course, there's a review of any vulnerable sites across the tri-state area. We were talking to the mayor of Reddington Township, and he felt that quake as well, but also said there was a major damage to one of the historical sites there.
1760s grist mill, and the facade, stone facade, it just fell right off, had shut the road down.
Quite significant.
So, yeah, that's something significant. Really can't stress this enough. You know, do be diligent and check things out. Make sure everything is okay.
You know, we want to head out to Washington Heights. We have CBS 2's John Diaz. He is by the George Washington Bridge. Of course, we've been talking about infrastructure assessment at this time. So, John, what do you know? And first of all, did you feel it?
Did you feel it?
Good question, guys. Yeah, you're right. I feel like a lot of people were like, what's going on? What was that? When we were, my cameraman, Matt Glassoff, and I, we were not too far away over in the Bronx. We were inside a school right by an elevated subway platform, right? So we were talking with some teachers. We were doing some interviews actually with students learning about the solar eclipse. And then we all kind of felt something, right? But no one said anything. And then out of nowhere, our cell phones were going off. People saying, hey, did you feel that? Did you feel that there was an earthquake? And we all looked at each other and we're like, did you think that was just the subway? We all thought it was just the subway. But then they started saying, we never feel the subway in this school. So we all were kind of scratching our heads like, yeah, that really was an earthquake. So we did feel it, but we weren't too sure what was going on. Then we got the news clearly that this happened. So we rushed on over here to the George the George Washington Bridge right here behind us. As you could take a live look, things are fully operating out here. Cars heading in both directions slowly, right? It is the George Washington Bridge, so there's plenty of traffic out here. But we did just hear from the mayor not too long ago, as you guys were talking about, the mayor saying, luckily, no initial reports of any big damage, any really damage. They were saying that if you saw any damage, though, to call 311, but no major damage to any structural problems, any buildings, bridges, or really tunnels. Many of these bridges, tunnels, they all were shut down shortly after this earthquake happened. We did learn that emergency crews, they headed out 5 minutes after that earthquake happened to start doing their inspections, shutting down even some air trains over at JFK as well to inspect all that different stuff. But so far, right now, all the preliminary results are saying that there are no issues. But they are worried, though, about the coming weekend. They're saying that, maybe some small cracks in any foundations or anything like that. That could be some issues. So they say to call 311 if you see any of that. But for now, reporting here live this afternoon from Washington Heights, John Diaz, CBS News, New York.
Thanks, John.
John, thank you so much. Let's head over the bridge right now. We have Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey joining us now over the phone. Governor, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you both. Thanks for having me.
And how is New Jersey after this morning?
Not a typical Friday morning for sure.
Certainly.
But I think I'm knocking on wood here. So far, so good. I agree with your colleague in terms of things getting back operational. The reaction was swift and very impressive by the likes of the Port Authority, our state police opening up its emergency operations center, local and county officials. Again, so far, so good, but we're not taking any for granted, and we're going to expect aftershocks, et cetera. So we're still on high alert, as you can imagine.
Governor, we talked to Adam Mueller, who's the mayor of Reddington, New Jersey. He said the 1760s grist mill had kind of major structural damage. Have you heard any reports of anything like that? And again, that would make sense. Something that old could be damaged with a quake this size.
You bet. We're hearing limited reports of damage like that. That's not to say there isn't structural damage on some of the, particularly these, as you rightfully point out, the older structures. But it is, at this point, 2+ hours into this, we're hearing limited, little to no injuries, thank God.
Good.
Folks basically using their common sense, which is the way to be on something like this, to not panic, but to be level-headed. And obviously, we're going to keep on this in the hours and days ahead.
And Governor, where were you, and did you feel the earthquake?
I am at a conference out of state, so I did not feel it. But our son is at home in Middletown, about 40 to 50 miles from the epicenter. Called us immediately and said, "I think we just had an earthquake." And he said it lasted for sort of 15 to 20 seconds, and it was a significant amount of jostling.
Governor, can you give us an idea of the review of vulnerable sites at this time in regard to infrastructure? What is happening right now with your emergency teams?
Well, the most important locus for both of that would be the Port Authority, and on the list of old structures would be the tunnels under the Hudson River. Mm-hmm. The rail tunnels were built finished in 1911. Which is why we're building 2 new ones. George Washington Bridge, your colleague reported, is back up and running. NJ Transit infrastructure The air train, I think your colleague said at Kennedy, was still not operational. Same thing at Newark Liberty. They want to make sure the infrastructure there is sound. In the meantime, shuttle buses are being used. So then that review will go on. It won't just be via the state police or the Port Authority, but that'll be with local and county officials, and that will be over the next many hours, particularly as it relates to potential aftershocks, and then for the next many days ahead of us.
What do you think about this, Governor? The last time New Jersey had a quake this big was back in 1783. I was a young kid at that time. It's been over 100 years since we've had a quake like this, but people need to remember that it does happen.
Listen, this is another great reminder. Who saw a pandemic coming 4 years ago? Who saw an earthquake coming this morning? We got to live and learn. We just finished an independent assessment of our COVID actions, and the assessment was over 900 pages. And you have to live and learn from something like that. And the same thing will hold true here. You got to make sure we do a full postmortem, determine where we were properly prepared, where we weren't, and make sure that we're stronger going forward.
Governor, what advice do you give the folks of New Jersey at this time? I mean, we've been talking about, there could be something that could happen, a week from now, whether it be cracks in your home or like we're looking at some video of cracks in the road. So is there something that you want New Jersey residents to know now, 2 hours plus after the earthquake?
It's a great question. First, keep a level head. Secondly, use common sense. And if upon an eyeball inspection you see something that doesn't look right, make sure a professional knows about that. Expect that aftershocks are part of the whole reality with an earthquake. So don't be surprised if there's more jostling. And again, use common sense. I know Governor Hochul said in New York, if you're feeling like you're something starting to jostle, you don't want to be in a high rise, you don't want to be standing next to scaffolding or a building. That's common sense, and that we have less of the concentration of high rises, obviously, in New Jersey than New York City has. But use your head, stay level-headed, don't panic, and do the smart, common sense-based thing.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, we thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us. Governor Murphy, thank you very much for giving us an update.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And glad everyone is okay. No life-threatening situation.
All right. We have been watching CBS News New York and their continuing coverage. We heard there a moment ago from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. Let's go to CBS News White House reporter Bo Erickson, who is following this story for us as well. He is in Baltimore covering the president's trip there. Bo, what is the very latest from the Biden administration?
Yeah, from an earthquake to a man-made disaster here in Baltimore today. We're expecting the president to leave the White House shortly, and on his way here, he is going to have an aerial tour of that collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge that's right over my shoulder here, and it is quite a sight to see in person, I have to say here. He's going to be taking in the wreckage, and then he will be meeting with local officials here on the ground as well. And when he gets to the site today, after his remarks, he is also going to meet with family members of the 6 construction workers who died while they were working on the bridge in the middle of the night. And a White House official says that in addition to grieving along with the family members today, he's also going to express his personal gratitude and also the nation's gratitude for the hard work that these construction workers were doing in the middle of the night, filling potholes. A lot of people maybe think that is a thankless task, but not to President Biden. He's going to be mourning with those family members today after his remarks later this afternoon.
And Bo, back now on the earthquake, wondering what we know about how the president has been informed. Has he been briefed? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we were told by the White House press secretary that the president was briefed on the earthquake in that New Jersey area, and the White House team is going to be in communication with the governor of New Jersey there and other local officials, and the federal government, according to the White House press secretary, can help out in any which way that is needed. Here in Baltimore, which is about 2 hours drive south of in New York there and also New Jersey, we did not feel any tremors or shakes here, so the president's trip is still on, and he's going to be coming here within the next hour or so.
All right, and Bo, I'm wondering, just back to the bridge collapse. Apologies for the back and forth here, but I know we're covering sort of both aspects of the president's visit there as well as the response to this earthquake here. But on the bridge collapse, I know there has been some disagreement in Washington about federal funding. What do we expect the president to ask Congress for?
Yeah, it's only been 10 days since the bridge collapsed, but that is the big question here today, is when will the reconstruction start of the bridge and how? And right after the bridge went down, President Biden said that he was going to move heaven and earth to reconstruct this bridge. And he also promised that the federal government will fund the entirety of the cost of the reconstruction. However, that will require congressional approval to do so. And what we saw today from the White House, they made that official ask to Congress to pass this emergency supplemental money to fund the full 100% of the bridge reconstruction. And the director of the Office of Management and Budget, she said that this is consistent with previous bridge collapses, specifically that 2007 bridge collapse in Minnesota, when just days after Congress came together on a bipartisan level and passed emergency funding to get the reconstruction process going in for that Minnesota bridge. The Maryland officials here today meeting with the president, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who I saw just arrive here, they are expecting Congress to do the exact same here today. However, it is unclear if or when that will happen.
All right, Bo Erickson reporting from Maryland for us. Bo, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We want to take you back now to CBS News New York and their continuing coverage of the earthquake that hit the Northeast. Let's listen in.
No, not right now, no.
All right, so far the cats appear okay. Paul, you're okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we're happy to report Paul and everyone's all right here, but we're just going to pan back over to the home where you can see these two properties leaning against one another as well. City workers are here assessing what's going on. I also just want to point out that city officials arrived here to the scene and they tell us that Newark, all city buildings, including City Hall, recreation centers, are closed, that the city is currently inspecting buildings for any potential damage, power outages. That's all the information they had right now. But again, residents out here just wondering if or when they will be able to return home. And again, for any residents here in this area wondering what's going on, buildings inspectors, they are inspecting, making sure these homes are safe to enter. As of right now, they are currently not. And again, a homeless outreach team is here to make sure everyone has a safe place to go. Mary, we'll send it back to you in the newsroom.
Hey, Natalie, I don't want to put you on the spot. Are you saying these buildings are touching? Are they now touching, or are they just leaning?
So they are touching, but again, because we're going to pan back over to them, because we did not previously see what they looked like. You can see all of these properties are very close together. So if we actually go to the house to the right of 313, I'm going to get Al to just zoom to the right where there is a decent amount of space. You know, we don't know exactly how much room was previously between these buildings. So did it just sort of lean slightly to the left? But if you look up, you can see a little bit of damage there at the rooftop. So it appears to have shifted. But again, I don't want to say anything beyond what city workers and officials are confirming to us here.
All right, Natalie.
So that's what we are seeing here at the moment.
Yeah, as we are taking a look at that area cordoned off in Newark, and all of those residents evacuated at this time. If you're just joining us, this is a recap of what we know. A 4.8 magnitude earthquake hit the Northeast just before 10:30 this morning. The U.S. Geological Survey says the epicenter is in Reddington, New Jersey. That's about 4 miles north of White House Station. There are some reports of damage. Right now, we have not heard of any injuries.
Governor Murphy says the New Jersey State Emergency Center has been activated to respond. NJ Transit says they are inspecting all tracks, and the MTA is checking the integrity of subway stations. All bridges and tunnels in the area are also being checked as a precaution.
Now, Jenna Lieber, head of the MTA.
All right, you have been watching CBS News New York, part of the continuing coverage of that 5.8 magnitude, 4.8 magnitude earthquake that hit the tri-state area this morning. We heard from New York City Mayor Eric Adams earlier today, who said there were no reports of major impacts to infrastructure or injuries. We are, of course, going to continue to follow this. We'll have much more coverage of this earthquake coming up at the top of the hour. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Prime Time, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Hello, everyone. everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. We are in continuing coverage of a 4.8 magnitude earthquake that shook the northeastern U.S. earlier today. The epicenter was about 40 miles west of New York City, near Lebanon, New Jersey. Here was New York City Mayor Eric Adams earlier this afternoon.
Questions that need to be answered. All of us felt in some way or another the earthquake that hit our city around 10:23 a.m. We felt the impact of this 4.7 magnitude earthquake. The epicenter was in Lebanon, New Jersey, about 50 miles from New York City. And as you know, this is a developing situation where you're always concerned about aftershocks after an earthquake. But New Yorkers should go about their normal day. First responders are working to make sure the city's safe. And one thing we do so well in our city is bring together all of the agencies that are involved and our partners in other entities. Everything from the MTA to the Department of Buildings, the parents who are concerned about their school children. Chancellor Banks would be here to report on that. But we say over and over again, the safest place for our students, we believe, will continue to be in school. At this point, we do not have any reports of major impacts to our infrastructure or injuries. But of course, we're still assessing the situation and we'll continue to update the public. We're in touch with the White House, the governor's office, and local elected officials. And I encourage New Yorkers to check on their loved ones to make sure that they are fine, not only from the infrastructure damage, but this could be a traumatic moment for individuals going through an earthquake. And if you feel an aftershock, drop to the floor, cover your head and neck, and take cover under a solid piece of furniture next to an interior wall or in a doorway. And so I want to thank the emergency staff and first responders for their work to keep New Yorkers safe. Earthquakes don't happen every day in New York. So this can be extremely traumatic. The number of texts, calls, and inquiries that people sent out to not only our administration, but to family members checking on them. We know how this can impact you. But we're ready for the unexpected. This is New York City, and we respond accordingly. We will continue to update New Yorkers as we get more information. And I will now turn it over to Commissioner Iscol.
Our Errol Barnett, he is in Brooklyn, New York, and joins us now. Errol, what else do we know about this earthquake so far?
Well, Elaine, as part of that press conference that we heard from the mayor and all of the city officials, there are some 1.1 million buildings in the New York metro central area, and they're advising building inspectors and people running sites under construction to go ahead and check them out. As we've referenced as a 4.8 magnitude quake, it's the type of thing that really makes the earth move for a few seconds. It will feel similar to a large semi-truck or vehicle driving near your home. And so it's not a devastating quake, but for building sites, construction areas, of which there are so many around New York City, it could be the difference between a site being safe and now being unsafe. Immediately after this quake happened, there are reports that some businesses evacuated completely, for example, in Staten Island. There are some 20 million people in the New York City metro area, and so the number of people who were able to feel this quake is significant. There was a brief stoppage at both LaGuardia and Newark airports for a moment this morning. That has been lifted, but there could be travel delays as it relates to that. And as someone who felt the quake, it wasn't jarring to me, but my wife felt the quake, and she was seated in one place, and she was unnerved by it because things in our place were moving around, and people have reported seeing pictures shake, seeing animals become upset, and we are still waiting to hear from all the major hospital systems to make sure that there were no adverse impacts on special surgeries that could have been taking place. And I'm here in a part of Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is a tourist area, and I continue to see, dozens of people going about their days as usual, taking pictures and enjoying the scenery. But it was certainly alarming for a number of people here in the city in New York today.
Errol, you mentioned a moment ago that there had been some periods where flights were grounded at a couple of the airports. I'm wondering what else you might be hearing regarding sort of local transportation systems. I know officials spoke about that at that news conference where Eric Adams was. Have there been any kind of reports or updates on this service to local transportation systems?
Not as far as we know at this stage, Elaine, and that's also part of, I think, a positive summary we're seeing all the way from local officials here in New York when it comes to transit, education, business, and the governor's office. She also said that while the state is taking this very seriously, there's nothing immediate to report as far as damage. But look, all those reports are still coming in as we speak. I can also share with you that in the past 2 hours or so, I've seen at least 3 emergency alerts come through on my mobile device from local officials warning of aftershocks. And if you take a look at what the USGS is reporting about this quake, not only was it felt from Baltimore all the way up to Connecticut, but there is a 45% probability that within this next week there will be another magnitude 3 quake or above. There's a 15% chance of a magnitude 5 or above. So we're still in a space after this quite unusual shake. Not completely strange that it would happen in this part of the country. There is a fault line nearby, but it doesn't happen that frequently. There still remains a danger of an aftershock to some extent. So it's important for folks to be alert and aware of that as well. But the Holland Tunnel, the major transit systems all appear to be moving as scheduled.
All right, Errol Barnett reporting from Brooklyn for us. Errol, thank you so much. Let's turn to John Vidali now, joining us. He is a seismologist and the Dean's Professor of Earth Sciences at the University of Southern California. Professor, thanks very much for being with us. So to Errol's point, I'm wondering if you can give us any sense of aftershocks and the possibility now. It is 1:06 here on the East Coast. We're a couple of hours out from when this event happened initially. How unusual, how common would an aftershock be at this point?
Well, it's pretty common. I mean, almost every earthquake has aftershocks. It's just that most of them are small. And as he said, there's a good chance of magnitude 3 aftershock in the next day or so. We usually consider aftershocks last perhaps a week, dying away, with time after the big event. There's already been a magnitude 2 about an hour after the earthquake. That's all that's been recorded that I've seen. So there's a chance, but it takes a magnitude 5 really to do much damage. I haven't heard reports of damage from the main shock, and so there's like a 1 in 20 chance of something bigger than the main shock. But in fact, a lot of the time when that would have been likely, but has already passed. So I think very small chance of anything damage coming up in the next few days, and even less after that.
And I wonder, Professor, if you could just give us some context and some perspective here. How unusual is it for an event of this magnitude to take place in this part of the country? And why might that be?
Well, these events are common in the West Coast. We have magnitude 5s every year along the coast. They do happen in the East Coast, but it's more like once every couple of decades. We do know of earthquakes that have happened of this size before near New York City, but it's only been a couple in a century. So it's not a shock. On the other hand, it is an unusual occurrence. We like to say it's a reminder that we need to prepare in a place like New York City that rarely gets earthquakes. Even a little shake can kind of test some systems, and it's good that people are inspecting to make sure that nothing was disturbed.
Yeah, what would be the questions that you have maybe on that front, Professor? Just structurally speaking, these are inspections that are continuing to happen along bridges, in tunnels. We heard New York City Mayor Eric Adams talk about, at this point, there does not appear to be any kind of impacts, major impacts to infrastructure, certainly no injuries to speak of. But over the long term, what would be the questions or concerns that you might have, given that it was not a 5.0, but a 4.8 is certainly something that got a lot of people's attention for sure.
Yeah, well, it would lead people to take a more careful look at the faults in the region. We have geodetic instruments like your car with GPS where we can try to tell if the ground is shifting. we always could use a more precise map of just where the faults are and how fast the tectonic plates are shifting. It's far from the major boundaries in New York, but also people can take a look at, which places that people have built or have amplified shaking. Soft ground can increase shaking by like a factor of 2, and we're always trying to calibrate the engineering to make sure that the buildings are built to the standard that they need, even if the earthquakes only come every 100 years.
And is there a way, when you talk about aftershocks, is there a way to sort of predict, the frequency or the time frame at all that an aftershock might occur?
Yeah, we do a lot of the statistics. I mean, mathematically, I could give you a rule. It falls off like 1 over time, but basically, after a week, it's fallen off to about 1/10 the rate that you'd see after just 1 day. But we can't predict any individual event. Earthquake prediction has basically stalled. What we can do in the West Coast, and we've already implemented, is have earthquake early warning, and that's where the sensors first detect an earthquake, estimate how big it is, and broadcast a warning, and you can get 5 or 10 seconds of a heads-up time to be ready for strong shaking. It's not much, but it actually can help quite a bit.
And is there a way to tell whether or not an earthquake, a particular event, might be a precursor to something even larger in magnitude, or is that not something that science can tell us?
That's the holy grail. I mean, we've been looking for earthquake prediction for 100 years and analyzed every pattern we can think of, and every year people tell us even more exotic ideas of how it might work. But no, the only real indicator of increased danger is when there is a big earthquake, we have aftershocks. So right after a big earthquake's the worst time in terms of danger. But when big events that we see around the world just don't give us a warning.
And the questions you have after an event like this here, what would some of those lingering questions be for you as someone who studies these kinds of events?
Yeah, from our point of view, the most useful information comes from the seismometers that are in the ground, and they tell us our models of shaking amplification right. So do we have the stronger buildings where they need to be stronger? And also, if people find flaws in buildings, if this magnitude 5 cracks some things, shifted some things that it shouldn't have, we always have to have our eyes open for surprises. So that'd be the main thing. We don't expect to see much damage, but certainly it's worth looking to make sure we're aware of where the weaknesses are.
All right, Professor John Vidali, we thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. It's extremely helpful as we wait to see what the next 24, 48 hours or so brings. Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Let's turn now to CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve, who has been following this for us as well. Chris, I know you are in Baltimore awaiting President Biden's arrival and visit there, but let's talk about what we know as you've been monitoring the airports and the other sort of infrastructure and transportation hubs in this area here in the tri-state area. What do we know about the airports at this moment?
Well, Newark Airport still has a ground stop for many flights in effect, and we know from United and Delta that they've had a handful of diversions. Delta had 1 flight divert that was heading to Newark. United tells us that they've had a few that diverted from Newark to other airports because of this ground stop. Now, some of that is simply because the airport needs some time to check the condition of the runways, the tarmac, and the buildings, that kind of thing, to make sure that things are structurally sound, but also that there's no debris anywhere that could get kicked up and ingested into a plane engine. That would be very bad. So we saw ground stops at both JFK and Newark, and some delays at LaGuardia because of this. Newark remains with a ground stop for many flights coming in. New Jersey Transit has said that they're expecting 20-minute or so delays both directions as they're doing bridge inspections following the earthquake. These are the kind of abundance of caution maneuvers you would expect because you want to make sure that the infrastructure is safe to go over after an earthquake, even if it was a relatively small one. The airlines look at what's going on right now is probably pretty manageable. Obviously, the longer that Newark stays in a ground stop, the more delays that will impact. But right now, this should be a relatively limited ground stop, we think, based on what we saw at JFK, provided there's no damage or anything, and so far there are no reports of that. United Airlines telling us they have no reports of any injuries to their employees or customers. Delta also telling us no reports of any injuries. One person at Delta told us that it felt like a large construction truck drove by. So this was something people felt, but as you just heard from the earthquake expert there, it would cause some movement, but not likely to cause catastrophic damage, certainly. So that's the good news there.
And Chris, you know, you're well aware of the tunnels that lead into Manhattan here. I wonder if there's any word about some of the rail systems or the traffic tunnels. Have you had a chance to kind of monitor and get any kind of updates regarding the status of those?
The Holland Tunnel, we saw an update that everything was good in the Holland Tunnel. You'd expect the Lincoln Tunnel to be checked, and Amtrak will certainly run a test train through the tunnels under the Hudson for the trains as well. These are just sort of the standard thing you would do in a circumstance like this to make sure that that everything in abundance of caution type of thing. Typically, underground, as odd as it sounds, tends to fare better in an earthquake than above ground. So it seems likely that those tunnels will be okay. But what we've seen is that the relevant transit agency is doing the checks they need to do to make sure they can operate the system safely.
All right.
So you may see some delays throughout the day here, Elaine, I think is the bottom line. But it doesn't sound like this is going to be something that snowballs into a substantial airline cancellation or a commute nightmare for folks getting home, any more so than you would normally see on a Friday in the tri-state.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Chris Van Cleve. We appreciate it. The earthquake continues after a quick break. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Prime Time, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back. As we've been reporting, a magnitude 4.8 earthquake rattled the Northeast today. Let's go now to CBS News New York's Jennifer Bisram. She joins us live from New York City's Emergency Management Headquarters in downtown Brooklyn. Jennifer, welcome. What's the latest?
You know, the good news, I should say, in all of this is that there are no major damages, and city officials are urging New Yorkers to just go back to their normal day. You know, here at our OEM headquarters in downtown Brooklyn, we saw representatives from almost every city agency, from the mayor, the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, Office of Emergency Management, everyone here just kind of talking about the things or the steps that were taken to ensure the safety of New Yorkers. Now, we're told that no structural damages have been reported, but if you see anything in your home, in your office, in your business, you should report that to 311, not 911. Save that for an emergency. We're told school officials, the school's chancellor was also here. He said things are going to continue at school. There aren't any early dismissals, and after-school programs are back on track. You know, and so the bridges, the tunnels, everything they said is back in order right now. The one thing, though, that we did learn is that construction projects, those are construction owners, people that are on those properties, they're the ones right now that are taking a little closer look into their projects to make sure that there aren't any damages. But other than that, you know, New Yorkers went through a 4.8 magnitude earthquake, and as of now, everything seems to be okay here. We'll send it back to you, Elaine.
All right, Jennifer Bisram at CBS News New York. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Well, a source tells CBS News that hostage talks are set to resume on Sunday. The news comes hours after the Israeli military said this week's deadly strike that killed 7 aid workers in Gaza should never have happened. The IDF released its findings from a probe into the incident, saying, quote, those who approved the strike were convinced that they were targeting armed Hamas operatives and not World Central Kitchen employees. It went on to say, the strike on the aid vehicles is a grave mistake stemming from serious failure due to a mistaken identification, errors in decision-making, and an attack contrary to the standard operating procedures. 2 Israeli officers were fired and 3 senior officers were reprimanded as a result of the investigation. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams is in Tel Aviv with more.
Israel's military says it wrongly believed that a militant was inside one of the World Central Kitchen vehicles. It says after striking that car, it identified people moving to the second car, which it also hit, and then the third, killing all 7 aid workers. The report also found that the Israeli military's cameras failed to detect the markings on the World Central Kitchen vehicles. It confirms in large part the account of the attack given earlier this week by Chef Jose Andres, World Central Kitchen's founder.
They were targeted systematically, car by